When I actually got into the police department, I knew where I was going already. I told them transit, they did me the favor, they put me in transit. Transit crime in the last 2 years is up a significant percent. The brutal things that you see in the train are the people getting pushed in front of the train or people getting hit by a train. Slashings, forcible touchings, robbery, old lady going to church on a Sunday, violently pushed down the stairs. In the NYPD, we're taught not to fight fair. If you're 1, we're 2. If you're 3, we're 4. If you're 5, we're 10. That's the way it goes. Biggest gang in New York City. You don't lose.
Tony Hernandez grew up surrounded by the mafia in Queens, New York. In fact, his uncle was one of the leaders of the French Connection. As a kid, Tony would hang out in the bars and social clubs that his uncle ran for the other wise guys. But for some reason, Tony went the other way. He became a New York City cop where he worked for 10 years down in the subway system. Tony tells us what it's like being a cop in the grimiest place in the world with some of the grimiest criminals in the world. His stories are wild. He's got a great YouTube channel called Corruption Connection, which you should go check out. And for more content, we have a very special Patreon episode this week with the one and only Ed Calderon. Go over to patreon.com/TheConnectShow. Without further ado, this was one for the ages. You're going to love it. Tony Hernandez, right here on The Connect with Johnny Mitchell.
I was born in a neighborhood called The Hill. Like many other Italian-American neighborhoods at the time, the mafia was very present. Like every young guy, don't you want to be in the street? You'll hear this story over and over again, from the inner city kids in the ghetto all the way to the white kids in the suburbs. The cars, the clothes, the jewelry, the girls, like it all intertwines, And when you're a young, impressionable kid, especially growing up in a fast place like New York City, you want to be in the mix. My father met so many wise guys. They were totally shocked when I said I wanted to become a cop. And the first thing that they told me was, what do you think about undercover?
That's when I see the lights behind me start to flash. And I didn't even think, I just hit it. I was driving like my life depended on it. Then I parked the car, hopped out, closed the door, and I started running.
And he pulls out a burner, a shank, it's like 6 inches. And then he passes it to me. And he goes, here, that's yours. Don't ever leave the cell block without this. He was the reason I made it out of that place alive.
I wonder, God, dude, you were so close. You have all of the genetic and environmental factors to have been a criminal.
It all could have pointed in that direction for me. Yeah. When I was young, I was in the street. Like every young guy, don't you want to be in the street? You see the street guys, what they have. And you'll hear this story over and over again, from the inner city kids in the ghetto all the way to the white kids in the suburbs. The cars, the clothes, the jewelry, the girls, like it all intertwines, And when you're a young, impressionable kid, especially growing up in a fast place like New York City, you want to be in the mix,
But you literally witnessed it. You're from Queens. You're from the boroughs.
Yeah, I'm from Queens.
It's the last place where there are wise guys.
Yeah. I was from a neighborhood. I was born in a neighborhood called The Hill, okay? It's called Queensboro Hill on the map. It's a section of Flushing that borders the LIE and Main Street. So it was a generational name. Now, if you think of Flushing, everybody's going to think Asians and stuff like that. There's a huge concentration of Asians in Flushing now. But back then, it wasn't like that. It was a generational neighborhood. So when people would move from the more populated places like Manhattan, like my grandmother was from Corona. They came from National Street, over by Spaghetti Park over there. It was still there in Corona, Spaghetti Park. It's a famous park by Parkside Restaurant. It's another known wise guy spot. Tough Tony passed away. He was supposedly a captain with the west side of the Genovese. That was, their territory. So that's like where my origins of my family is from. So in the 40s and 50s, like many others, they bought a house across the park in Flushing, nice suburbs or whatever, in this place called The Hill.
And this is your mother's side?
This is my mother's side, right.
Okay, and she's Italian?
Correct.
All right.
Right. So, during that time or whatever, like a lot of other people, they wanted, front lawns. They were living in those tenements, they wanted lawns, they wanted better opportunities for the family. So they moved out there.
Yeah.
So the kids that I hung out with in that neighborhood towards the tail end of, let's say, like the 90s or whatever, early 2000s, they were the grandkids of these people. You know what I mean? It was like their parents were born there. Their parents knew my parents and we knew each other, and like many other Italian-American neighborhoods at the time, the mafia was very present. You know, it was all, and you didn't look at it as the mafia. You know what I mean? It was just like, you know, Joey would come or whatever, and he would drop off the cigarettes to my grandma. My grandmother would buy packs of the cartons of cigarettes, untagged cigarettes. You know, that was my grandmother doing that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, they used to, even the old ladies used to go to the card games. My grandmother's friends, they just named the last names: Rizzo, DiGiacomo, Daniello, Riccobono. They all played in the mafia social clubs around the neighborhood.
Because they're the customers.
That's it.
The customers aren't criminals.
They smoked the cigarettes. They played the cards. They bought the alcohol, whatever, you know, so it was a thing. And then, you know, in the pizzerias, in the back of the pizzerias, they had the Joker poker machines. I remember as a kid, I used to want to go play that thing. I used to go in there and get a slice with my grandmother and go run to the back, like, you know, being a little, you know.
And put numbers down, you know, you playing the numbers when that was a thing?
There was numbers all over the place. Everybody was some kind of running numbers. The local supermarket was a Key Food. You know anything about Key Food? Who owned it? Taps. Their parent company was owned by Patsy Conti. He was a captain. So, I mean, there was wise guys in there all the time. You used to see the guys in the suits waiting with the trucks for the trucks to come in or whatever, you know, sitting there, you know, like, who knows what was on those trucks, right?
Right.
But, you know, I would go in there. I didn't see them as, like, wise guys or bad guys. I'd go in there. They'd give me, like, a slice of bologna from the deli counter with my grandmother, stuff like that. It was a family-oriented neighborhood,
Hustlers,
you know?
businessmen,
you know? But you knew, as you got older, you know, you knew something, you know, it was a nice place to grow up or whatever, but you just knew that there was some kind of criminal underbelly. You know what I mean?
When did you learn who your uncle was?
So my uncle himself was not a member of organized crime. Just want to make that clear. But his whole family that preceded him to this country was involved in organized crime. You're familiar with the French Connection? Back in the 60s, you know, they made it famous during the movie or whatever, the French Connection. My uncle, when he came off the boat, he came here in the 70s. He was from Naples. His side of the family settled in Long Island City. And in Long Island City at the time, there was a very notable gangster named Virgil Alessi, who, I don't know if you're familiar with that name. Him and Vinnie Papa, they had the French Connection. It was theirs. At one time during the 70s, there's an article, you can look it up in the Daily News. Virgil was named with Leroy Nicky Barnes or whatever, and all these big top drug guys as the 13 most powerful drug traffickers in New York City. He was number one in the metropolitan area.
Wow.
So
he was getting the heroin from the French directly.
There's a book, okay? It's called The Heroin Trail, that traces a kilo of heroin from the mountains of Indochina to Virgil Alessi's hands in Long Island.
Wow.
The steps, it wound up all the way there to there. These guys had links to the direct French Connection because the heroin came from Indochina, went to Marseille, processed, and then they took it through Canada and eventually got here. At the first stop, this is where these guys were. So very few guys.
Tell us that chain really quick. That was fascinating. Like the chain from, you know, the poppy harvest in, say, Thailand, Indochina, to New York. What were the steps, the countries that it stopped in?
So most of the heroin came from Turkey, let's say, right? The opium and the opium gum, right? All of that was eventually smuggled through France. In Marseille, it was actually Corsicans that were involved in this, right? They had Corsican gangsters that were Paul Carbone, and you can look up the other guys' names. But they were able to smuggle, in labs, process the heroin, smuggle it to Canada and eventually to the United States. And the movie that they made about it was when they busted in the car. You know, it was like 66 pounds of heroin. It's a true story. You know, the guy who was actually involved in the French Connection, Sonny Grasso, I met him many times. What a gentleman. I got a great picture of Sonny. He used to love, what was the name of that restaurant in Long Island? Mondocati's. Mondocati's in Long Island City. Yeah, he's a famed heroin detective. So when they busted that, the reason that Virgil and these guys actually rose to infamy, even though they were involved in the French Connection and importation, the reason that they became infamous is because they stole it back in the 70s. I don't know if you remember this. In 1972, in the property clerk's office, the NYPD property clerk's office down at 400 Broome Street in Manhattan, they needed the French Connection dope to bring it in front of the Congress or whatever, to bring it out and say, you know what, we need to, you know, prosecute, this is what it is. And when they were looking for the dope, they couldn't find it. And eventually when they found it, they discovered that there were red beetles inside. All this dope was like littered with bugs. And when they tested it, they found out that it was cornstarch and flour. So the story was that Virgil, along with Vinnie Papa and a couple other guys, bribed the notoriously infamous corrupt SIU detectives from the 70s, you know, American Gangster, those kind of guys. And they signed out the drugs and returned flour. So during the whole process, it was discovered that 388 pounds of narcotics was missing from that property, Kirk Sawyer. It's valued at $70 million in the 70s.
So it made it back onto the street.
Definitely made it back on the street.
So your family was involved. Was your family Virgil? Was he your uncle?
Virgil's related to my uncle Michael.
I see. Okay.
So my Virgil, aside from being, who he was or whatever, like many other of the mob guys, he had legitimate businesses, social clubs, restaurants. You need someone that you can trust in order to run those things. And my uncle was one of those men that he trusted. Although it was family, my uncle also proved himself. In 1973, he was subpoenaed in front of the grand jury in regards to Virgil in order to testify. Kept his mouth shut.
Yeah.
Didn't say a word. This is all proven. It's just, indictments about this. So, that just kind of bolstered his status a little bit more, to run one of Virgil's restaurants.
So while Virgil was in prison, because the French Connection was obviously busted up, right? Your uncle basically ran all of his legitimate businesses.
Not all. There was a lot of guys. It was a big operation.
I see.
Virgil's story is so interesting. You know what I mean? Not just because, I was around the guy. I met him when I was young many times, family parties, all that kind of stuff. It's more along the lines of where he came from in the world of organized crime and what he did. You know what I mean? So we're talking about a guy who was a phone man. You remember like in Goodfellas, the guy answering all the phone calls? A phone man for Jigs Forlano, who was one of the biggest bookies in the whole country. He was partnered with Ruby Stein. The Westies cut his head off. I don't know if you know the story. But Virgil worked for him. And he ran gambling joints for Jigs Forlano. Eventually, if you go back in his record, he had a lot of gambling busts or whatever, during the 50s and stuff like that. And then somewhere around there, he developed a relationship, I guess, probably from the neighborhood, Vincent Papa. They wrote books about this, you know what I mean? And, these guys became infamous during that,
And somehow they made a heroin connection that was...
Vinny Papa was supposedly, he was a burglar. He went into houses, he did a lot of low-level crime, but somewhere during the 50s, around there, he was probably one of the biggest heroin importers in the whole country, and Virgil was his partner.
Wow. And then Virgil basically took it over and ran with it.
Vinny Papa actually got killed in prison. He got stabbed up.
Wow.
He wasn't a rat, but he was planning on ratting on members of the SIU, the corrupt police department.
Wow.
You familiar with the name Herbie Sperling? Also a gentleman who was involved, a little Jewish guy, tough little Herbie Sperling. This guy goes back to some really big players in organized crime. He's a legend himself. Jewish guy who also had a piece of the French Connection. He was a rival of Papa. He supposedly pushed for it to get Papa killed. Because even though Papa wouldn't rat on anyone else, he said that those guys were the scum of the earth, those corrupt cops, and he wanted them to go down. The mob wasn't having it. The mob protected the steps. It wound up all the way there.
So that was considered
these guys had
back
links.
then. Even if you were ratting on cops, that was still telling. Wow.
There was a 302 or one of those reports that came out. I'm not exactly sure what it was called at the time, but it came out where Vincent Papa had sat down with the authorities to discuss, I won't give up anyone, but I will give up the SIU. They're the scum of the earth.
Yeah. I believe it. Now, did you ever meet Virgil?
I did. And I was a kid many times. So we used to spend a lot of the 4th of Julys together and stuff like that. They hosted events and Christmas Eve, stuff like that. A handful of times. I was young. He died at a young age. Virgil, he was ratted on by Sammy. When Sammy flipped, he named him.
Sammy the Bull.
Yeah, Sammy the Bull named Virgil, and he did a couple of years for that.
Over what though? Just
whatever
being
he
part
was
of the
about. The government had a hard on for Virgil. You can just see throughout all his indictments after that whole French Connection thing, they were throwing him in jail at any possible thing that they could. I mean, there was a phone call that he made to a known associate that kind of violated his parole. They wanted him in jail because they knew he was behind it. And there's a wiretap conversation of Virgil's right-hand man, Rocky Evangelista, talking about this. They bugged Virgil's boat back in I don't remember the exact year, but they're all on the boat and they're counting the money from the heroin sales. And the government, the FBI had a bug in there. And you can hear Rocky Evangelista say, I personally made $180,000 or $188,000 from that stolen dope from the French Connection dope. So they were involved. So the government had a hard on for them, because they weren't able to convict them.
Hey guys, this episode is sponsored by our favorite longtime partner, Move. If you're a fan of the show, you know Mood by now. They're my favorite, #1 and only online dispensary, and they're getting even better. Mood has long been associated with Delta 8, but now they have an offering of many other types of products, including Delta 9 and THCA. And what's better than their new wide variety of products? They're still fully federally legal. Their online dispensary offers a wide variety of pre-rolls, edibles, gummies, vapes, and concentrates. All products ship discreetly right to your door. Lately, I've been loving the Sleepy Time Delta 9 THC gummies. After getting off stage at a show, I'm usually full of energy and adrenaline, which is a great feeling, but it makes it extremely difficult to get to bed. Luckily, these gummies are great for a night of blissful, deeply restorative sleep. American-grown Delta 9 THC with the Snoozy Triumvirate: CBD, CBN, and melatonin. Head over to hellomood.co to find the perfect products for your needs. And while you're there, use my coupon code CONNECT20 to receive 20% off your order. Plus, you already know that free 5-count pack of gummies. Again, that's CONNECT20. CONNECT20 at checkout at hellomood.co for 20% off your first order, plus a free 5-count pack of gummies. Thank you so much, Mood. All right. Let's get back into the episode. When did you realize who he was as a kid? Like, was it after he passed? Was it people telling you stories like, hey, this is who he really was?
So I would hear my father and my uncle talk about it pretty often or whatever. You know, they would say things. And it was just a regular thing. Like, my father met so many wise guys. I got a John Gotti story with my father. My father talked to John. He met John Gotti. Not in any kind of like official capacity, but it's actually a really great story.
Who's your father?
He's no, well, I'll get into that, whatever, but he's not affiliated to organized crime or anything like that. So
he's Mexican though, right?
He is, right. So
fascinating. How does a Mexican and an Italian woman hook up?
Spring break, Acapulco.
Of course.
Yeah.
Wow.
Been together for 40 something years,
you know. But he wasn't involved. What did he do for a living?
He was in the restaurant business as well, my father. Right. He was in the hotel restaurant business, but you know, he was very familiar with the cartel lifestyle. The place that he was from, you know, before cartels were a thing, we're talking about Felix Gallardo in the 80s and all that stuff. You know, my father grew up in the 50s. So he hates that I talk about this. He doesn't like to talk about it because he saw the really disgusting side of that life. Like, his uncles were killed. One uncle in Acapulco, I don't know if you know, like those boulders that they have on the side of the cliffs.
Yeah.
Somebody pushed a boulder on top of his uncle. Like, just wild stuff that he saw for being involved in like organized crime.
Yeah.
So when he got to New York or whatever, he figured like, you know, it was like a kind of an escape. He left that behind. But then when he met my mother, you know, the brother-in-law, you know, he met Virgil, you know, fast forward 1980. Now my father's working with my uncle in Virgil's spot. Yeah. So that's like how he kind of got him in the picture.
And what were Virgil's businesses that your uncle and your dad were running?
Restaurants, catering halls, you know, they had stuff like that, bars, you know, any place. Think about a place back in Queens that you could run book out of. Could be anything, you know. They had the social clubs.
Run book means what?
Bookmaking. You lend money, you take bets, stuff like that. Well, Loan Shark, and they used to lend some money and take a lot of bets. You know, guys used to come bet on the horses and stuff like that.
Okay, so these weren't fully clean businesses. If you're running
any business that's fully clean, there's always something going on in the background if it's owned by a wise guy. Let's just be honest. They're never squeaky clean. Whether you're cheating on the liquor, whether you're buying the stolen food, there's always something that you can quote unquote call illegal. You know what I mean? It just depends on the illegality. Were they killing people in there? Probably not. But were they, you know, having illegal card games in the back? Was there a joker poker machine, stuff like that? Probably, yeah. You know.
So Virgil was making money while he was sitting in the can.
Of course.
Now, was he kicking up to a family? Was he involved in any one of the 5 families? Or did he have to, like, did your uncle have to pay anybody else besides him in the course of running these things?
No. So how it worked was basically that, like I said, they were family. So you need a family member to run your legitimate business, or at least someone that you consider family. Someone that's kind of clean or whatever, that doesn't, my uncle probably could have went the organized crime way and been, you know, successful because he was all his uncles. He was super connected, but it's not the life that he wanted either. I think that's how him and my father kind of bonded, because, you know, they both saw the dirty side of organized crime. The stories that they would tell me were, you know, harsh. Like I said, with my father and my uncle used to tell me stories like, you know, same thing, like, you know, back in Italy or whatever, you know, like uncles were killed and stuff like that. It's like, you know, you really don't want to get involved with those people, you know, even though you might be blood related, you do your thing, they do their thing. So in the course of time, or whatever, while these, the restaurants being run, whatever, my uncle ran the dining room and my father ran the catering side. So it was just a perfectly good fit.
Yeah, but if they're running book out of it, that's a family. That's a criminal element. Did your uncle have to let the wise guys in to run that business? Like, who's calling the shots while Virgil's in the can?
So there's tons of people. I'm not really sure how Virgil was integrated into the DeCavalcanti family. I mean, I speculate and there's reports about it, whatever. But you're talking about the New Jersey faction did have a faction in Queens and Manhattan. He integrated with them. It was pushed by certain people. Yeah. But at the same time, it wasn't like he was a French Connection guy, so he wasn't made. He was actually the inspiration in The Godfather for Virgil Sollozzo.
Right.
If you're familiar with the character,
obviously,
right. Yeah. So it was a combination of him and Vinnie Pop. That's who they were talking about. So he wasn't really tied to any of the 5 families, but he did business with all of them. Okay. Because they were all involved in heroin.
So he was kind of independent. He was just running. He basically was running these books and these little casinos by himself.
Right. If he was paying up to anyone or doing that thing, that was probably a step above whatever my uncle knew. You know what I mean? But let's just say like the bartender, people coming in placing bets with him. The bartender's a bookie. You know what I mean? It's like, then the waiter or whatever, that's a tough guy. He did time in jail. Like that's the guy you're going to call to break somebody's legs. There was things like that.
And your father's not policing any of that. He can't say no to that. Like that's...
They were friends. They were all like, everybody knew who the boss was. But at the same time, it's like,
So this is the environment you grew up in. You grew up hanging out in these bars.
I was coat checking at 12 years old without even knowing where I was, 20s, 50s, 10s. You Tony's son, you Michael's nephew, pop, pop, pop. Me and my cousin. We used to open the doors. They used to give us crazy money, So it was fun.
Well, clearly you're fascinated with the lifestyle. How did you not go that route? I mean, first of all, you were hustling weed in high school, right? Just like we all were. Running gambling, you said?
Yeah.
What was that about?
So when I was a kid, right, I went to a pretty tough school, whatever, right on the Queens, Flushing, Jamaica border, like Parsons. So it was a Crip school. It was in the middle of the project. It was all Crips and stuff like that. I think that's where I developed a little bit of my street smarts, a sense, whatever, when you're around kids from the projects, you know what I mean? They're very advanced at a young age. So, I learned that my family didn't teach me per se, and not even hanging around wise guys I would learn. These were street guys, you know what I mean? Gang members and stuff. So being there, it molded me a little bit, and I started to go that way. You know what I mean? I wanted the fast life, like you'd see the guy who was 21 with the big chain. You wanted to dress like the rappers or whatever, Gene Borello talks about that too, about Queens gangsters and guys from Queens. Like the new generation of guys, we didn't want to wear suits and shoes and stuff like that. We wanted to dress like hip hop guys, So, so that was the case. And I got into a little trouble. I hit like a little roadblock. First, I got in trouble with my father. My father found my stash.
Right.
Yeah. I had at the time I was, maybe just buying in pounds, you know what I mean? Or breaking them up into ounces or whatever. Kind of just supplement, but nothing crazy, you know what I mean? On any kind of scale.
It's a lot of weed in high school though.
It is a lot of weed.
It's a racket in high school.
But I'm going to tell you the reason why I was buying so much. When I was getting into a little trouble, whatever, and the gambling or whatever was just something that, I don't know, that came from birth. We used to play cards around the table at Christmas when I was kid. We used to gamble. Yeah. Literally. That was the thing at Christmas. We used to have the quarters and stuff. So it wasn't like I was doing anything wrong when I sat down at a table in a cafe and played cards, even though I was 15. I knew how to play. Why wouldn't I sit down, And they used to let you smoke and you could drink. Nobody really questioned, as long as you didn't create a problem. You know what I'm saying? So going forward, and the reason why I was buying so much was when I was kind of gearing towards that street life, my father saw it. And he said, you got 2 choices, my friend. You go to Catholic school, or I'm shipping your ass to military school. And I was like, what am I going to do? Whatever, So I was like, all right, I'm going to go to Catholic school. So I wound up going to St. Francis Prep. If anybody knows about St. Francis Prep, it's one of the most mafia connected schools in Queens.
Gotta be,
it's
right?
like, it's like the kids were 18 years old, 17, with their lights and brand new BMWs, Rolexes.
Right.
It was one of those schools. Yeah. You know what I mean? So
a lot of Anthony Juniors going there, if you know what I mean.
Anthony. Yeah, exactly. So it was like, it was those guys. So, now I was kind of thrown from this ghetto mentality of being in Parsons or whatever, in the hood, to more of a gotta wear a uniform now, you know, and it was just like a whole different thing. But what came with that? More money, more connections. These guys weren't smoking $5 bags or $10 like the kids in Parsons maybe would. These guys were buying ounces for their parties or whatever. Yeah. They were looking for more serious stuff for the, stuff like that. So that was where I kind of integrated myself as a little side hustle. And we did have the gambling too. There was, you used to find the football sheets, and you knew it was mostly the Italian kids that ran it or whatever, you know? They had the football sheets, and you come in, you bet with them, they were probably, just like you said in The Sopranos, they were probably running it for their father or their uncle or whoever else.
Or they just learned, they grew up watching them, hearing them talk about their sports books, and then they're just making it their own,
That's the way it goes,
And
you're product
weed,
of your environment.
Of course. It's such a fascinating subculture. Like I'm telling you, most of the country doesn't work that way anymore. They
have no idea. I don't think, outside of the Northeast, really, it's like, it's very different everywhere you go. Now I live in Vegas, which did have a mob history, but it's all tourists, and not many people even know about it.
So you get popped selling weed when you're in high school, and that kind of straightens you out.
So I wasn't selling weed in the high school per se. I didn't bring the drugs to school, but it was like take an order. Maybe I did. Okay, I'm not gonna say I didn't, because I would smoke myself after school, so I had to have it on me. But let's just say the majority of it was always outside of school.
That's what I meant. You were in high school.
I was during my high school years, right?
Yeah, you got popped, and then one night in the can kind of straightened you out.
It did. So I winded up getting popped by Queens Narcotics. All right. So I'm in Jackson Heights. Just left the barbershop. Got a nice fresh shape up, looking all good. And I needed to buy baggies. The little Apple bags they used to sell back in the day. They sold it in a record store. Right. So I'm on this record store on 37th Avenue. It's one block off the train. I'm walking there, and I thought I was getting robbed when I left. Okay. So a guy comes up to me, grabs my arm. And I square up. I'm like, what the gun comes out. So when the gun came out, obviously I was like, all right, you got it. I had a Nextel on, the old Nextel on my hip, the chirp. So, he grabs my phone and everything. I'm like, I'm getting robbed. But then he took out his shield and he's like, police, don't move, whatever. He gets me against the car. So I guess they were maybe watching the spot, you know what I mean? Not so much maybe watching me. But when I came out, and you know how much 400 baggies, it looked like this in my pocket, whatever. Maybe they thought I had money, whatever. They literally illegally searched me or whatever. Boom, right in my pockets, took everything out, whatever. I wound up having some weed on me or whatever, which was a mistake going to buy those baggies with weed or whatever. But,
Did you get a felony for that?
No. It was a misdemeanor. That I also had a knife. That's what really me more was the weapon, because they charged me with CPW. Yeah. So that was a little bit harder to knock down, but it wound up getting knocked down.
Okay, so
I went through there, and I went through it sucked because I went to the 110 precinct, whatever, which is the local precinct, and then I went to the bookings. So it was like I had to go through the whole process 36 hours, and you're sleeping on the floor with dirty, disgusting people. The guy that's sleeping right there on the floor is the same guy sleeping in the subway or something, So it was like, man, I'm in a Catholic school or whatever, I missed not the first week or whatever. I missed during the first week, I missed the day of orientation because I was in a cell.
That's how you know who's really about it and who's not. Every high school kid that's kind of doing dirt, just throw his ass in jail for a couple of nights, and we'll see if he does it again, Like I went to jail, and to me, I was like, oh, this sucks. I just won't come back. But I kept doing what I was doing, But you it scared you straight a little bit.
In a way it did, but in a way it didn't, because I didn't stop what I was doing. I was just a lot smarter about it. It was no more risks. I would never really walk around with weed. It was always meetups. If you wanted to meet me, I would meet. If I was meeting my connect to go get it, it was super James Bond type stuff or whatever, because it just wasn't worth it for me. And don't forget, my father, I was still living at home. Yeah. So it was my parents didn't know, I was doing that whole kind of behind the scenes kind of thing.
From a good family.
Yeah. My family's a good family, There's a lot of law enforcement in my family as well,
Yeah. Tell us about that. Who's in law enforcement in your family?
A lot of my first cousins are law enforcement, which is kind of ironic. I had some uncles on the job. One of my uncles, he got fired actually from the job. Yeah, he did some wild, pulled out his gun in the 80s, and in order for you to get fired in the 80s, you had to do some wild stuff. So he was at a party, wedding, got drunk. He was with the SIU guys, that kind of thing. Pulled out his gun, wound up getting fired. But you know, my going back or whatever, like my aunt tells me this, but I don't know if it's true. My grandfather was one of the first horseback cops to ride in New York City, and he ran with Teddy Roosevelt and the Rough Riders.
No.
Yeah, my Aunt Linda. Hey, Aunt Linda.
Wow. So it's the Italian side.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that side or whatever, basically, you know, they developed, they grew up, we mostly all grew up in Queens or whatever, you know, and everybody kind of just did their own thing, but wound up being cops, you know, and like by no chance at all. You know, I have one, I guess one of the most successful stories in my family as far as law enforcement is my cousin. He was an FBI agent. Yeah, he just recently retired. He was on, you familiar with Martin Shkreli, you know?
Yeah.
He was the lead officer on the case. Yeah, there's an episode I think he did on American Greed or something like that. He's on it, my cousin, Chris Donahue, yeah.
I like Martin.
Yeah?
Martin Shkreli seems like an all right guy. He's
I
got some
meet him.
points,
I
dude.
mean, he bought the Wu-Tang album. I want to see what's up with that. And
They really him. Like the feds, man, when they want you, you don't have to really commit much crime. They'll figure out something for you, you know? Right. Hey, everyone, just a quick intermission. I want to tell you about my stand-up comedy dates this summer. July 19th and 20th, I'm going to be in Chicago, Illinois at the Comedy Bar. Come on out. I got 4 shows there. And then in September 27th to the 29th, I'm going to be in Vegas doing Skankfest. I'm on a ton of shows there. That's the greatest comedy festival in the world. Get tickets at linktree.com/Johnny Mitchell. Once again, that's linktree.com/Johnny Mitchell. I'll see you on the road this summer. All right, let's get back to this interview with Tony. But okay, so you really got like, you're running in a complete like Queens cliche. One side of the family and your friends, gangsters. The other side, cops.
Yep.
And these are the boroughs. These are the environments that New York City cops come from. They grow up around drug dealers and Crips and uncles who are connected. And, you know, it's in your bones, right? Why do people become cops in New York now? Is it because it's a good government job still? Are they still considered a good job?
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, that was one of the reasons that I said, like, when they asked you, like, why do you want to become a cop? I didn't say that, like, protect and serve, you know, none of that stuff. I was just like, career opportunity and benefits, you know, like, let's be honest or whatever, you know, like, it was a kind of like a quarter life crisis for me, you know what I mean? Because I was making a lot of money, you know what I mean? Like, not even like selling the weed or whatever. That sometimes would just be like supplemental or whatever. My real moneymaker was working in these mob-connected restaurants, you know, and bartending in the bars. Anybody knows Wise Guys, they throw money like it's water, you know what I mean? Everybody wants to be a big shot, you know, especially after a couple of drinks. I was on the receiving end of that. So you could be a big shot, I call you sir, boss, whatever the you want, whatever, as long as you're dropping 100, you know what I mean? One of the spots actually, you know where Joe's Pizzeria is in Williamsburg? It's like over there. Yeah, on the north side. That was a mob joint.
Wow.
A guy named Rocky used to run book out of there, sell a little dope.
Yeah.
Yeah. I bartended there for a little bit. I mean, there was just so many little pockets, like you said, you know, and you know, I spoke with Gene Borello about this, and we kind of ran into each other ourselves when Gene was running around in the street, you know, the strip clubs. I used to love the strip clubs. Wise Guys always hang out in the strip clubs, you know.
So do cops.
Yeah. Astoria is like the strip club capital of America. There's like so many strip clubs in Astoria, like good ones too. So at the time, whatever, you know, I used to see Gene Borello, you know, I always say, like, we didn't like we're friends, but I knew who he was, you know, he knew where I came from for the most part.
Was he a big shot? Like, did people know him as like a trigger man, like a gangster?
Yeah. He had the reputation of a shooter, Gene.
Yeah.
For sure. There was he'd fight you, like he says this himself or whatever. He'll fight you, but you got to know who you're going to fight with. There's guys that'll throw hands. There's guys that'll straight stab you. There is no fighting with them. It's like knives coming out, whatever, you know? Gene was a shooter. Always with a gun and shoot you.
Yeah.
It's that simple. He's not going to get a black eye. He's going to just shoot you in the stomach and keep it moving, you know?
Yeah. So when you decided to go into the force, did you have aspirations to like work narcotics, be a detective, maybe be in the DEA or the FBI?
Yes and no, but it was kind of a double-edged sword. So one of the reasons that actually, you're probably wondering how a guy can be so, because like I said, jail didn't scare me enough to stop doing what I was doing. I would still be at the card games. I was still drinking like a fish with connected people. I was around, you know, in connected bars all over Queens. There was, you know, bars, Brooklyn, Manhattan. So it was like, I knew to avoid those places if I didn't want to get in trouble. God forbid I got caught in a bust or whatever. They raided the joint, you know, I'm risking myself here, for what? A couple dollars, am I gambling or whatever? So, I wanted to transition into something. I just didn't know what. I had no aspirations of law enforcement whatsoever.
I know that. I'm asking, like, would you have been hesitant to take a job working narcotics in Queens, knowing you could maybe investigate people that you grew up with? Like, would you feel like that's like a conflict of interest?
1,000%. 1,000%. So when I actually got into the police department, I was sworn in 2013, but I was approached in 2012. I had a significant amount of connections throughout my years working in the restaurant business, I mean, I'd work one party that would be FBI agents, and then the next party would be, people from NYPD, and the third party would be Rise guys. It was a whole mix of people. So I had met a lot of people, made a lot of friends and stuff like that. So, when I decided that I was actually going to be a cop, I was influenced by some of these detectives I saw in this bar I was hanging out in Bushwick. They were real suave detectives. They were able to come and go as they please. So I was like, these are not just those straight edge kind of cops or whatever. These are a little, they got a little swagger to them. So I reached out to some of my connections that I had, and they were totally shocked when I said I wanted to become a cop. Everybody I reached out to, a chief, I had a hook in the chief of department's office or whatever, they were shocked. When I told them that, I kind of got ambushed. They invited me to a dinner. I would go to these dinners to network and stuff like that. It was at Roma View. It's in Howard Beach, notorious mob neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
I'm meeting 3 high echelon cops in a mob neighborhood catering hall, right? It's right next to Russo's over there. So I get there, and there's a retired undercover. No, he's not retired. He's not in undercover anymore. He's in the intelligence unit now. My hook from the chief of department's office, who was a full bird inspector, and a chief from Intel. And the first thing that they told me was, what do you think about undercover work? So like ambushed me, whatever, sat me down and was just like going into all the work. We could use you. This would be great or whatever. You won't even go into the academy. You won't have a number. Nobody will know who you are. We'll just put you right out into the street or whatever. We vouch for you. We know all this. And brings me back to what you just said. I knew way too many people from so many different walks of life. I hung out in every single neighborhood. I was buying weed in Washington Heights. I'm gambling in Middle Village. You know what I mean? I'm going to a restaurant in Manhattan that has illegal shit going on in the back. It's all over me. It's all around me. You know what I mean? So I was just like, I'll think about it. You know what I mean? Then they floated a different idea after they saw that I was a little hesitant. They said, all right, how about you go undercover in the police academy? Kind of weed out the corruption kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? So I was a little hesitant, but I had said, okay. So the deal was to change my appearance. So I had to put on a lot of weight, shave my beard. I got this little pencil mustache that I'm, you know what I mean? And at the last second, I said no.
So you felt like that would have been snitching.
Yeah.
You'd rather be a cop that actually like does good for the whole society and not, somebody that takes down these people that you grew up with that you like.
Exactly. So it was definitely a conflict of interest, but it's a moral compass that you got. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, it's not the police department. All the bureaucracy.
Right.
Do I like you? Did I grow up with you? Did we, we go to the same school? Yeah. Like, do you spend Christmas with me and my family?
Yeah.
I don't give a
put you in prison. Yeah.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
I'm not that way,
So did you want to be a transit cop working in the subway? Did you float that as like the next idea?
That was my first pick because, like I said, I had family and it's wild to say that because people are like, who the wants to be in the subway?
That's a grimy in August.
Yeah. Oh man,
when there's on garbage day,
bro,
dude, it's like it's Dante's Inferno down there.
It is. It is, and the smell of piss you get you're very used to in a short amount of time.
Yeah, you got to.
Man. So what happened was, like I was saying before, I had some relatives or whatever who were in law enforcement already, and everybody was telling me don't do transit. I had one cousin who was like, you'll like it, but then the majority of the people were like, when I had told those same upper echelon people that met with me that day, when Academy Day comes and everybody gets their orders of where they want to go, everybody's waiting. So I was surprised. I knew where I was going already. I told them transit. They did me the favor. They put me in transit. So I knew I didn't get a pick of which transit, but I was going to be in that bureau. You know what I mean? So once you're in the bureau, you're good. So they put me in the in transit bureau, and then I guess I kind of in the beginning was like, damn, like it's hot. It was summertime, like you said or whatever. So like you're kind of overwhelmed or whatever. You know what I mean? Once you get down there, but it was the place I wanted to be. And my first week or whatever, I saw something crazy, like ridiculously right out of the gate. Old lady going to church on a Sunday, violently pushed down the stairs. Didn't even know that she was pushed down the stairs. Okay, so we get a call, right? Call comes over the radio, lady falls down the stairs, right? So we happen to be there. We were maybe a stop away, actually. We get off the train, we go there. The lady's in the scorpion position, kind of like this, at the bottom of the stairway. As she's at that bottom of the stairway, I go over, her nose and mouth were here on this side of her face. She's talking to me like this. Oh. I'm like, blood everywhere. Big pile of blood. You know fresh blood? It's real rich and dark and red. That was like my first foray into see that much blood. She was in a puddle. It looked like she got shot or something. So I was like, she was conscious though, which was weird. And ambulance came. I was like, what happened? Do you remember? She's like, I think I fell. They winded up, like you were saying, or whatever, who goes and investigates all that stuff.
Check the cameras, right?
The detectives check. She was pushed, bro. Wow. No reason at all. Pushed, slid down the stairs on her face. That's why it was all smushed to the side. When the ambulance picked her up, her face went over like this, like a flap, like whoop, whoop. This is like my second or third day on the job in transit.
And that's one of the dangers when you walk, being in NY and just passing literally millions of humans every day, somebody's going to be in a bad mood.
Right.
And you can't control if randomly somebody just found out he was getting cheated on or lost his job or he bet his entire life savings on the horses and lost. And you might be an old lady walking down the subway stairs at the wrong time, right? Or standing, God forbid, in front of the subway, which you saw too. You saw somebody get pushed onto the tracks.
That wasn't even, the lady, that was just my entry into the system. Okay, it gets crazier. So
are you uniformed at the beginning?
At this time, I'm uniformed.
Okay.
Yeah, when I first got out, I was uniformed. Everybody is. Unless you're actually, like I was saying before, in that specialized unit or something and you already put your time in, then they'll let you go your detective route because you already, went that way. So same thing. I'm in uniform. And the brutal things that you see in the train are the people getting pushed in front of the train or people getting hit by a train. It's like nothing you've ever seen or experienced. One story really sticks out. Well, there's a few stories, but like one that sticks out, whatever, was, so this guy was drunk. Okay, we're at Jamaica Center. A lot of things happen in Jamaica Center, Parsons Archer. It's a hotbed for crime. You name the crime, criminal activity, crazy people. It's just that's where it goes down.
Jamaica, Queens. It'll never be gentrified.
I doubt it. No. I doubt it. It's a tough area still, especially the South Side. It's a tough area still to this day. So, that being said or whatever, right? There's a guy, he got into a beef with a guy or whatever. It looks like they were arguing, We saw the argument or whatever, but it was just words at this point. It wasn't really to the point where it was going to be anything. We're like, hey, come on, you go your way, you go, we're just trying to do this. And it looked like it was going to be okay. Like, me and my partner, we turn around to walk away and, you hear the scuffle when you turn around. Jamaica Center is the last stop before the trains go to the train yard to get cleaned and serviced. So you don't see that train coming out of the tunnel. You have no idea that it's coming from that direction. You think it's coming from this direction. The guy pushes him. They're fighting, we turn around. As he pushes them, the train speeding into the stop hits him in the face. This guy does a 360 in the air. It like swiped his upper part of his body here, like shoulder face. I watched this. Boom! Smacked him. He did like a 360 in the air and hit the pavement. The other guy was so scared after that happened.
But he didn't fall onto the tracks.
He didn't fall onto the tracks, but his force of that train, what it did to his body, was like if a giant came and just went like a Hulk and just threw him. He was like, boom.
Did you ever witness like the aftermath of somebody jumping in front of a train?
Yeah, a few times. Yeah. The leg. So on the 7 line, the leg fell down from the street, from the elevated subway right onto the street.
Yeah. No, dude.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So for people who don't know, the 7 line is the purple line. And when it goes into Queens from Manhattan, it goes above ground. So it's on those, it's the big famous scene in every New York movie. It's going above the neighborhoods.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah, it runs through. So it starts in Long Island City, and then it runs through all the neighborhoods. Sunnyside, Jackson Heights, Corona, Woodside.
So was it a jumper or someone got pushed?
So, well, I'll give you 2 stories. Whatever, all right. So One time, this was, I think it was on 82nd Street, Jackson Heights. Two guys had gotten into a fight. Okay, these guys were South American gangbangers. You know how it goes. They don't give a f the cops. They don't care about anything. It's on.
They don't care about life.
It's on site. If I see you and you're from a different hood or body or whatever they call it, right? So these two gang members had a beef. They see each other in the thing. Shootout right there in the train. I wasn't there. I responded to it. I wasn't there.
Shootout in the train
station right there. It's on video. It's on. Somebody put it on Instagram or YouTube.
Yeah.
It's actually on video. Is what I'm talking about. So you can find it. They're two like short Hispanic guys. One's wearing like a Knicks jersey, I think. And you see he was dead. He got shot right in the head. Pam, pam, pam. Shot right there. At this same station, it was like a hotbed for activity. There was always stuff going on there as well. Because you had downstairs, you have all those neighborhoods with Colombian, Ecuadorian, Mexican, and a lot of them are gang members. You know what I mean? So they fight over just petty. Like, you know, you're wearing the wrong ink, you know, like LA style here, you know, yeah, you know how it is. So, in that same station, there was I'm not sure if this was a scuffle. I'm not sure. I don't want to misquote on it or whatever, but something happened, traffic, you know, somebody pushed or whatever. Guy falls in the train, gets run right when the train's coming, boom, run over. His leg pops like this down the tracks and falls down to the street below. He had to go his leg and stuff. Yeah. The guys are sending me pictures. Yeah, the guys are sending me pictures. The blood's still leaking down on all the cars. Sunroof open.
What kind of shoe was the guy wearing? Do you remember?
I don't know. It's probably, who knows? It's probably, it's in the picture or whatever. I'll find it.
Hopefully it's not some knockoffs.
Yeah.
Hopefully he died with some dignity.
Some J feet.
Dude, I always think about that because people are jumping in front of the train all the time. It's like a common New York City way to kill yourself.
Yeah.
But it seems like one of the most painful ways to go. Like, that's not an instant death.
That's not an instant death. No,
There's no
angled. This is better though. There's something that we call space cases. You know what a space case is?
No.
Okay. This is kind of actually brutal. So
compared to the last story.
Right?
Elementary school right there.
Yeah, this is a precursor. So let's say you get pushed or you jump in front of the train and you don't die. What happens? You get caught between the train and the platform. There's only one way to get you out of there. We call emergency service unit, ESU. They come and they bring something. It's like an airbag. They call it an airbag. They put it right next to you and they blow the train back. It's the only thing to rock the train off the track. So it goes like this so you can get in.
Yeah.
The only problem is that you're mangled in there. So as soon as they do that, your insides fall out.
Of course.
Your body just, bleh.
Yeah.
So there's been times, I haven't seen it personally or whatever, but there was a guy that I work with who he actually had to make this call. Call your loved ones. Yeah, tell them you're going to die. Yeah.
Literally, because
you're going to die. Because once ESU comes and does that, your inside's going to fall out. So once you're mangled in there, you're alive. We don't know, just because you're
the
like
train's keeping you alive right now.
As soon as we separate, you're going to die. So make your last wishes and phone calls and all that kind of shit. Yeah. Yeah.
That's, I mean, God, you got to be glad you never had to do that. Because that's,
I've seen space cases. I've seen them, you know, but I've seen them get mangled, and still alive. And then they die after. I haven't made the phone call to do the last wishes thing.
Are they shrieking in pain?
Sometimes people are in shock, complete shock, like wide open or whatever like this. And then other time, there should be video of this too. It was a Spanish guy, ponytail. In Manhattan, and I haven't seen this really in other boroughs, in Manhattan, because of the way that the tracks are aligned, there's gates that come out and go back. They retract every time the train comes close, so nobody falls in between.
Right.
It looks like he got stuck in between that. So when the gate came back, it kind of crushed him, and it was a brutal thing to see.
Do you think
he died?
Do you think most of those people did it on purpose?
Yes and no.
I know some people, there's horror stories.
You have to.
People get.
So immediately there's an investigation done. Like immediately. The second that you put over a man under, and a man under constitutes anyone that's under the train or comes into contact with the train. It's like a little loophole they got there. If you come into contact with the train, if the train conductor says, I hit a person or whatever, immediately there has to be a complete investigation, even if the guy walks away from it.
Right.
So they'll determine what happened. So if the case was, in that case, that the guy fell, there was nobody to pursue. But people get pushed all the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
I want to tap civilians. You know, you never talk to strangers in New York, right? I know the rules, but when I see a white girl at a stop at the 2 stop in Crown Heights.
Right.
Not exactly gentrifying, yes, but it gets ugly after 10 p.m. Trust me.
Yeah, yeah.
I spent a lot of time out there, and she's on her iPad. She's waiting for the train on her iPad with her headphones in, looking down 2 feet from the tracks. I want to be like, I want to push you on GP and then pull you back up just so you don't forget. Like, have some responsibility for your surroundings, for your personal safety. It's
Zero street smarts. And the phone, these things, they make it even worse, bro. Even myself, I'm guilty sometimes. You know, I have excellent situational awareness, but I even find myself getting caught in the phone. So can you imagine someone, like you said, from the Midwest that has no street smarts whatsoever and comes to New York City? They are a prime target and they get hit all the time.
Okay, so tell us about some of that crime done against transplants, we call them out there. Like, did you see that? Like the phone swiping when you first joined the force, iPhones were starting to become ubiquitous everywhere.
Yeah.
Was that a hustle, like snatching phones, or what were some of the main crimes you saw when you first got on the force?
That was big. The phone snatcher thing was huge. I mean, you know, I saw that more when I got into the plainclothes unit, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but just like uniform patrol, what you're experiencing is something like you've never seen before. You know what I mean? Because you're not riding the subway as a normal civilian. Me, I was a little numb to it because I was on the trains as a New Yorker already. I understand, but you got to take action now. You don't just mind your own business like you normally do and just keep it going. You know what I mean? So you put yourself into situations sometimes that you really don't want to put yourself in, but it's inevitable. So a lot of the things that I would say was that's really, really rampant is abuse, like sexual touching and all that stuff. And I'm not just forcible touching. I'm not talking just forcible touching, which is subway's crowded. I rub my thing on you because I'm a little close. So, you know, we swipe each other. Now I'm talking about like deviant, violent stuff. I had a girl one time. She came up to me, 14th Street, me and my partner. We weren't working in Manhattan at this time. We had come upstairs just to get some air. I don't know where we were passing through or whatever. She comes up to us, complete shock. White girl from the Midwest, just like you were saying, transplant or whatever, complete shock. It's like, what happened? She's like, I think I was like touched, whatever. So long story short, we get into it. She wasn't only touched, the guy rolled up her skirt. She was in shock, didn't know what to do. She froze, rolled up her skirt and put his fingers in her. Put his fingers in her. Right midday Manhattan, 14th Street on the train. And kept going.
Yeah.
You know,
stayed on the train.
She ran away. The guy kept going on the train. So when she came up, I mean, you know, we obviously made the report, sent her to proper authorities, but she's like, go get him. Like, aren't you going to get him? Like, what? I'm like, miss, this guy could be in Jersey by now. You know what I mean? Like, how long ago? She's like, 5 minutes ago. I was like, the train, you know, you're 14th Street. Like, he just hops off, he goes to Port Authority, he's gone, you know?
Wow.
Now,
when that happens, could you like identify, because obviously that's got to be on camera, right? Unless
there's no cameras inside the train cars.
Okay, hold on. Off. Are you serious?
Back then there wasn't. No, zero. I don't know if there's any now. I don't think so. No.
Okay,
there's no cameras inside the train cars. There's only cameras inside the stations.
Okay, so you could get robbed, groped, beat up on the train
on the actual
as it's
train.
moving.
Correct.
And it's not filmed.
Correct.
I don't think anybody actually realizes that, because everybody thinks they're on video all of the time when they're in New York, 24/7. How do they not have cameras on the train cars? That's just insane to me.
When I was a cop, there was no, and I only retired in 22.
Yeah.
There was no subway cameras on the train. It costs too much money to equip every single car. I don't think the city would even float that idea.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just to put one CCTV at the back of the car? I don't know, but
there might be one CCTV at the back of the car, but that's one cart. There's how many carts in the whole thing? They're not going to put one in each one. They won't do it. They'll put one where the conductor is, maybe, you know, stuff like that. But they're not going to put one in every single cart.
Okay, so crime will never go away in the subway then.
When they put the cameras, but even so, like, you see the cameras everywhere. It's not really deterring crime, though. You think it is? I mean, I don't know. If you're a criminal and you're a lush worker, or you're somebody that's going to rob or grope or do your thing on the train, you don't. Some of these guys Instagram their crimes now. They record themselves, so they don't give a shit about the camera. It's not going to deter them. They're going to do what they got to do. You know. So
the lush workers. This is another fascinating thing. These are gangs that specify in robbing like passed out people or sleeping people on the train, right? Yeah. Tell us about them.
So you know, most of these lush workers, they're older. It's very rare that you'll find a young one, but they're just basically opportunistic. And there's groups of them that work together. You know, they'll give each other heads up or whatever. They'll stay at certain stops. But sometimes they're lone wolf operations. So what they'll do is the reason we call them lush. Obviously, they'll go after drunk passengers or maybe somebody sleeping on the train. It's not always drunk. You know, you got a long shift at work or whatever. You're coming home, 7 line, you're coming from Manhattan all the way to Flush. That's a long ride.
Of course.
You're going to fall asleep maybe. You know, I'm guilty of it. I've closed my eyes on the train. I don't know if you ever have been there, but these rides get long sometimes. So, you know, they would prey on the people coming out of work or the clubs and drunk and they would fall asleep. They'd have razor blades. They would take the razor blades and, unsuspecting to the victim, cut their pockets open.
Wow.
Or their belongings. Like I'd say a girl had a pocketbook or something. The bottom of a pocketbook would be sliced open. They would take everything out. The credit cards, the IDs, the phone, all that stuff. I mean, it was hilarious sometimes because even in uniform, you knew that somebody just got hit by a lush worker. The guy's pockets are all cut up and he's like looking around like, what the like, yeah.
Wow.
And these guys are so good. They don't even wake you. These people don't even know what happened to them. They're so good. Sitting there, chiseling away your pockets. You don't even feel it.
And they're probably old school junkies, right?
A lot of them, yeah. A lot of them are old school. So they, you know, they're used to New York in the 80s, those old school, like Jimmy and Locks and all that. They're real slick characters.
Right,
you know?
right.
Arrest records taller than you.
Right, for sure. Yeah, right? God, I imagine like you bust some of those guys, there's no way they remember how many times they've been to jail.
Can't even. Like you don't even want to look at their rap sheet. When you go to, it's hilarious when you got to arrest one of them because you go to hit the button on the print report or whatever, and you'll see the thing at the bottom. It's like 100 pages. You're like, oh,
load paper.
Yeah,
load paper.
It's like you got to just sit there. It's like, yo, when's your first arrest? Like, 1980. Like it's like, oh, you've been doing this whole time.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of those guys, you know, and then there's the more violent ones. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's when it gets to another degree. You know, those guys are a little harmless with the cutting and stuff like that. Maybe they'll run away if you catch them. Sometimes they'll fight you, but most of the time they'll run away. But the violence, and you know what the violence is masked a lot of times as in the subway system? The dancers.
No.
Showtime! Hey, Showtime, let's go. You know those guys?
Yeah, they get on and they put the little boom box.
Those guys are all perps. All of them are. Some of them are legit hardcore perps.
Really?
Yeah. And they're strong too, you know? They're all fucking muscled up from swinging on those poles.
Yeah.
Some of them are little, you know, real skinny, 120-pound punks. But, you know, some of them are like grown men who are from the, you know, they spend years in prison or whatever. They're used to bar workouts and activity, and they come
They
on
got
the subway.
brolic,
They get brolic. So the charge itself for somebody dancing on the subway is reckless endangerment. Still a really good collar, but
oh, really? So that's a crime.
that's a crime. Yeah, that's a big crime.
Because they're on there all the time,
Oh, yeah.
and nobody even bats an eye. Like everybody's just coming back from work, reading a book, and you got some little black kids doing monkey bars on the pedestrian poles.
There's a long list of crimes and prohibited behavior in the MTA. Technically, you're not even allowed to eat on a subway car. It's like stupid shit that they put. But one of the crimes they do take serious is the dancing because it's reckless endangerment. You can hurt the public by doing this stupid. They take it a step further though, these guys. They put the hat in the face. If you don't give them anything, they might sock you. They might punch you right in the mouth. Now you just escalated to an assault. Some of them, if they, you know, see that you're a weak and they can run over you or whatever, and we've got calls for this all the time. What happened? I got robbed by the dancers. Yeah, it was like, they beat me up. I wouldn't give them any money, so they can beat me up. Yeah, so it's all a show until they want the money, and then they just take it from you.
And what percentage, I know it's impossible to say the exact percentage, but how many of these crimes are actually solved?
I mean, you'll have to look at the reports, man, to be honest with you, because if you are not, you've seen the show, The First 48, whatever, you know, it applies to the same thing when you're dealing with those initial street crimes. It doesn't have to be murder. But if you don't catch that guy on the scene, I got a male Hispanic, 5'9", black hair, brown eyes, light skin, running down Roosevelt Avenue, and then he just disappeared. Like, you know, if you're not catching him then, if you're not getting an accurate description or know who he is or some kind of camera footage, you're not getting those guys.
And there's not enough manpower or time
to even look through all that.
To go through the footage, even if he's on camera.
The only way that I've seen that they'll do that is if it makes the news. Or it's something highly publicized that they'll put the best detectives on it or something like that to show that they're doing something, you know?
Right. So I guess, do they tell you specifically like only these crimes and up
Yeah.
Are we going to go actually pull the CCTV footage and try to match it?
No, they didn't say things like that. They won't say things like that. But if the crime is violent, let's say, most likely you'll have somebody follow up on it.
Right.
You know what I mean? If it's something a little less and it's happening more frequent, like, hey, I got my cell phone stolen and the guy pushed me down. Did you hurt? No, I'm okay, but he pushed me or whatever. So it's a harassment and a grand larceny, whatever.
We're not looking. We're not going to take the time.
We're looking for aggravated assault, murders. The guy's notorious for pushing people in the subway, stuff like that.
But like, yeah. So if somebody got punched by one of the dancers and they ran off,
dancer ran off?
Yeah, the dancers ran off. I know that. Would actually somebody from the NYPD go to that stops CCTV? I mean, because by the time
a simple assault,
because by the time you pull the footage, you already got 5 more calls.
Right.
So it's just volume. So you have to decide what's important enough to follow up with and what's just simply not.
No, 1,000%. If you see a pattern, okay, and that's where the crime teams come in, like myself, what I did later, the crime team, anti-crime, plainclothes stuff, that's where they come in, okay? So when you're saying the follow-ups, we'll follow up with that. So the CO of the precinct might read all the reports and say, listen, there's an uptick of robberies, cell phone robberies on the F line between 6 and 10 o'clock. Need you guys there. You know what I mean? Need you in plainclothes blending in, see what happens. And many times or whatever it's happened. I remember at Queensboro Plaza, I caught a guy in the act, pickpocketing somebody. Very hard to prosecute though, because the victim doesn't want, like, no, I got my phone. No, miss, I saw. He just put that phone back in your pocket when he saw me go grab him. He slipped it back in. I was like, just sign this for me or try to get me so I could take this guy, and people don't want nothing to do with it. You know? So I had to let him go. Things like that happen often, But pickpocketing is a real big thing, and the violent assaults, man. That's what once there's patterns or makes the news, that's when it's all hands on deck.
When you started to see more, like you were working there in like the mid 2010s, where you start to see a lot of like Central American immigrants, a lot of South American immigrants coming into New York. Did you see an uptick in slashings? Because those cats are known for, I mean, Dominicans are too, but they're known for just cutting people with knives. Did you see an uptick in that?
Not so much, but you saw an uptick of gang on gang violence, and they don't only just fight with knives, they had guns too, all kinds of weapons, the gang was more concentrated towards like the Roosevelt Avenue, which you see now is like a really hotbed for all the crime. They got the Venezuelan gang coming over at Tren de Aragua, you're familiar with them. They're known as the cancer of South America, and they're just wreaking havoc all over New York, you know what I mean? So around that time, you saw more of like the Sureños, let's say, and like the little Ecuadorian cliques, and Dominicans were a little further down in Corona, but like that Jackson Heights particular area is where you saw most of the gang violence and, like you said, stabbing, shootings, whatever.
So still in Queens. You're still in Queens working those stops. Were those some of the hottest gang stops in those deep Queens boroughs? We
were concentrated on Flushing, for the last stop, for the lush workers and robberies and that kind of stuff. And the more you branched out from Flushing, changed. So obviously you went to Corona, there was a heavy gang initiative. Then you went to 82nd Street, was robbery and the swipers, and it was just a whole bunch of different going down on the line, You went to Queensboro Plaza, now you're dealing with the guys from Queensbridge, you know what I mean? Or the guys that just got out of Rikers, or they went to Horizons, so they're all passing through the station. So it was a cast of characters at every station you went to. And this is just Queens. When I first came out, I was all over the place. They sent us to the Bronx, I was by Yankee Stadium. Everybody knows, people talk about something in the water in the Bronx. They all fight, and it's a tough place, you know what I mean?
Bronx is wild. Bronx is like place. Old school, like black people. Like, I'm not talking about old school black people. I'm talking about like old school, like packs of teenage black kids will be on the subway, just like, and it's intimidating. Because they're loud and they don't give a shit about manners. And you look at them and you're like, I don't want a profile, but like somebody is carrying. Somebody's dirty.
They don't give a shit about the consequences either. You know what I mean? So it's like these kids nowadays, they respect disrespect. You know what I mean? So it's like we call them roving bands. In the
roving bands.
Yeah, that's
what it's coming back in New York.
We had to put that over the radio when we saw them. You'd usually see them during the festivals when they would get wild. You know what I mean? Like we'd get called to a detail, or whatever. You know what I mean? They'd be like, "There's a roving band coming down 55th Street." After the parades and stuff, and they would cause anarchy. They'd rope the women and rob guys. guys up, slashings, all that
Right.
kind of stuff. You know what I mean?
Wow.
So that was
Did you ever have to put down a roving gang?
break it up? Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. You know, like I forget what parade it was. Might have been Dominican and Puerto Rican Day Parade. Or
Oh,
whatever,
man.
and they get wild. You know,
Were those some of the like busiest weekends for collars? Like, do you remember like specific like high crime?
They don't want you to collar during that time. They want you on the street.
Oh, right. Yeah,
They
yeah.
want you to make
Oh,
it.
right.
You used to get in trouble if you made a collar. If it was a must arrest, it was a must arrest.
Mm.
But if you made like a little collar to get off the street,
Right.
you were in some trouble, man.
Mm.
We want you out there policing. We don't want you doing paperwork back in the thing. You know?
How do you think the nature of the criminal element in the subway changed from 2013 when you began until 22 when you retired? In the most starkest way.
Honestly, I think it's gotten way worse. Yeah, I mean, it was bad at that time, but now you just see it like a prevalent thing every day. New York City subway, New York City subway. Transit crime in the last 2 years is up a significant percent. I don't want to misquote, but we're talking like every category. Slashings, forcible touching, abuse, robbery. The numbers are skyrocketing through the roof. And it's been following a pattern like that for the last 5 years, 6
Yeah.
years, I want to say. I want to say like, around that time.
A lot of it's probably driven by the migrant crisis in NYC.
Oh, 1,000%.
Yeah.
I mean, I go back there now, whatever, and I see what's being done. Like, the sanctuary city shit, it's not working. You know what I mean? And the problem, like we were saying with the migrant crisis, is that, there's some people, just like every other generation, they want to come over here, they do it the right way. You know, they come over, they want a better life. But in that mix is a bunch of people that don't give a shit about America, and they definitely don't care about New York City. They're here to commit crime. One of them, like I was saying before, is Tren de Aragua. They call them the cancer of South America. They're involved in migrant smuggling in Chile. You know what I mean? Like they dominate it. You know what I
Right.
mean? So then coming over to the US, you hear about them in Texas, California, Miami, now New York. And these aren't just gang members. They're significant criminal organizations, transnational organizations that are just kind of putting their tentacles around the major cities.
Yeah, well, they shot that tourist and the cops just like a month or two ago.
2 separate shootings committed by this gang. They'll shoot anybody. Both times he was trying to shoot at cops, by the way. The guy, the first one, he was a 15-year-old kid. You know the story. He came out of one of those stores in Times Square. The security stopped him, pulled out the gun, and just started shooting. He didn't care that he turned around. There's a picture of it. He's got the gun behind his back, shooting at the cops.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And this recent shooting as well, the cop actually survived. Thank God. He got shot.
Yeah.
Same thing. Migrant.
When you were on the job, did you have any coworkers close to you that got shot, or you heard about people getting shot on the job?
Well, there was a lot of police deaths during my tenure, cop shot. I don't want to misquote anyone's name or say, I don't know all their names off the top of my head, so I don't want to mention some guys without mentioning the other, but one that stuck out a lot for me was the Randolph Holder. He got assassinated, he was shot in the face.
Oh, what was that?
Yeah, he was.
What was that case? I don't remember.
I'm not sure of the specifics.
Is he
but
the Asian guy that got
No, he's
assassinated?
the black
What?
guy. He's the black dude. He got killed uptown.
Wow.
Yeah. He was an officer for a while. I believe like 10 years on the job, and he was chasing down a career criminal. I believe it happened like by an overpass, and he got shot in the face. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I heard that come over the radio.
Did you-
That's why it was a little,
I know you mostly were taking knives off of people while you were down there, but did you?
that was my specialty.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Taking
I
big
got-
ass knives.
I had tons of knives collars, man. Like my CPWs for knives. I don't know. I think it was just something about me, like my time in the street and growing up. I knew what to look for.
Yeah.
Like I'll never forget one guy who we had come out of the academy and we're like on the first day. He's like, "Don't lie to me, man." I was like, "What?" He's like, "You were a cop somewhere else. Like, there's no way. Like, how do you like?" I was like, "Nah, man. I was from the street. I'm from Queens. I know how to do this stuff.
Right.
I know what, you know what I mean?" They
Yeah.
were just like kind of blown away with how much I knew. I knew all the streets like the back of
Right.
my hand. So
Yeah.
the sergeants used to pick me a lot of the time to drive because I knew how to get around. Or, hey, go pick this guy up. He needs to,
Yeah.
transport stuff
Yeah.
like that.
so when a guy's walking funny, you're like, he's carrying.
there was just certain tells that people give away, especially when they see a cop. They don't even realize they do it, whatever. If you see a cop, the first thing they do is they grab to check if they have it. I'm like, what the f are you doing? Like
Yeah.
I just watched you touch it. You know what I mean? So that was a tell.
So do you just say, get over here, get on the wall?
Sometimes depends. It would depend on the circumstances of the situation. Why am I stopping them? What'd they do? So guy just does this and he looks suspicious. You can't really stop it. So it would be something along the lines where I would watch his behavior. And if he did something to initiate the stop, it was like, great.
But hang on. So, stop and frisk is the famous Rudy Giuliani policy that's still in existence. And I think Michael Bloomberg famously used it more, even though he was a Democrat and supposed to be like, more liberal. Right. He implemented it even more than Giuliani did. And basically that was essentially suspended people's constitutional rights. And if you fit a profile and a cop had a reasonable suspicion, not even reasonable, like burden of proof, reasonable suspicion that you were committing a crime, if you had drugs, weapons on you, you could just be subject to search. That's all you needed. You didn't even have to be, in the act of doing a crime. So how much of that did you employ while you were working? And are there any rules that you have to follow?
So there's a caveat to what you just said as far as it comes to drugs and stuff like that. The stop and frisk law is supposed to be if you see a bulge which resembles a gun. If I see a big bulge like this, like I was telling you before when I got arrested, which was totally illegal why they arrested me, and they just thought that I was doing something wrong. They didn't see my knife, which I had stashed away. They saw a big bulge in my pocket. There's no way that bulge can be interpreted as a weapon or a gun. You understand? Now there's a pipe and it's fitting a pipe and it's in the side of my pocket. I want to stop and frisk you. I want to see what that is. The problem is, like most other laws and rules or whatever, people abuse them. Yeah. So the cops were using the stop and frisk to jump out on anyone and everybody. Oh, I saw an object. Oh, I saw that. I felt, or they went to touch here and then they felt back here. How can you feel back here? You didn't even see that, So it kind of.
And who are you going to believe, this kid or the cop?
Exactly. Yeah. So that's where the laws kind of got abused and cops just went crazy with it. Stop, literally jump out boys, we call them. They used to jump out on me as a kid. Anybody, just jump out on you and just get you, see what you got, shake you up. Okay, bye. See.
Okay, so see, there is a rule around that law. You have to see a bulge.
You have to see something that resembles a weapon, something that can do physical harm, let's say.
I see.
What I mean? Seriously physical.
So you got to look out for that first. It can't just be a kid touching his pocket.
Yeah.
Did you try to get people... would you be standing on the platform waiting for the subway to come?
Sometimes. I mean,
when was the best time to catch them, I guess?
Sometimes it was, going back to what you said, it was spontaneous utterance where they just say. So I would just ask them, like, what's in your pocket? And they would tell me, like, they would be like, I got a knife. Like, let me see it. And they take it out. And that's plain view. It's kind of like, on my part, I don't know if you'd call it, it's not really entrapment, but it's just like, it's the rules, like, what do you got? I got a knife. Can I see it? Yeah, now it's in plain view. Now you come with me. You know what I mean? So with things like that. But at the same time, in regular uniform, that's what we're there for, to deter crime and stuff like that. So it's kind of hard to get an arrest sometimes or do that when you're sitting there in uniform. Right. So what we would do is we would break into these MTA rooms. We had access to them. They gave us subway keys, but we would get in there and we would like bend the vents of all the vents that were coming in to aim towards the turnstiles and the subway system and kind of hide back in there. If you ever seen the movie Money Train, they do that. They go with the binoculars. It's a little Hollywood, but we did that in a really raw and gritty sense. I'm talking about rats all over the places, roaches, just homeless people. You'd run into people that actually live down there in the subway while you were looking for a collar. Like, where you going? I'm going to the vent to look up there, whatever. And it'd be like some guy sleeping on the floor. It was wild,
Did you have to pull out, or like would people try to run? Or if you saw him with a knife and you said, get over here, hands on the wall.
If I see you with a knife and you're running, I'm going to chase you. But for the most part, whatever, at that time, I was a stern guy. You know what I mean? Like, I'm real nice and everything, but I know how to turn it on. You know what I mean? So when those guys, when you mean business, it's the fight or flight. They're going to fight with you or they're going to run. So you can kind of see that. They're mostly just, all right. It's either fight, flight, or give up. You know what I mean? Like that.
Right. Do you, now that you have these guys, these Venezuelan gangs and these Ecuadorian gangs and these people, like, we don't know what they're about, except they clearly have no regard for life.
Right.
Because they're from horrible places and they learn this stuff, right? It's like the early generation Marielitos from Cuba. It's the same kind of thing. They bring the violence that they saw in their home countries. Are these people getting processed by like immigration? Like, you see one of these guys with a knife or a gun, you arrest them in the subway. You book them at the precinct. Are these people like getting immigration holds?
Absolutely not. Not from what I see. I mean, I know that, like I said, when you asked me before or whatever, if it's, do all these crimes get followed up on? Do you think that we even have the NYPD even has the manpower to follow up on every single migrant that got arrested and do all that or push them to the feds? They don't. They only would do it if it's a highly publicized case, like the shooting of the migrants or the guy who said that he's getting all that free money and stuff like that. Then they'll go after you and put stuff.
But how do you think that happens? That happens from a guy with a gun. Like, that's how you stop the shootings, by getting tough on people that are carrying guns.
I agree with you. I mean, I don't see how the laws are making sense too much. But if you can, there's no bail in New York. It's the bail reform. You know, they have no bail up to attempted murder.
Yeah, can you explain that?
So it's a revolving door of crime. So I saw the beginning stages of it when I was a cop, when I would get declined prosecutions from the ADAs.
Right.
You know, it was like, why are you declining this prosecution? And it was like, some of them were legitimate arrests, but they cherry pick what arrests they want. You know what I mean? It's intricate, but I guess it's been going on forever, you know? It's just the way that the system works. So, you know, the COs, your commanding officer, might fight with the AD. Why are you declining? Everything is okay. And I mean, it would be some serious crimes, you know, aggravated assaults, robberies and stuff like that happened within the subway system, you know? And they would just decline to prosecute. So the writing was on the wall back then, I guess. And then now, like, you know, after the pandemic, just blew up. Everything up to attempted murder is literally like a revolving door. There's guys that get arrested like 30 times and they're still out on the street.
For felonies.
Yeah, for felonies. Yeah, anything up to attempted murder. So I think like attempted murder might be something that they can give you zero cash bail to get out on, but everything below that. So what's below attempted murder is a lot of felonies. Below that.
So if
felonies.
So if I like just pistol whip the
If
guy.
you rob somebody's phone, that's a felony.
Yeah.
Right?
So I can get out without, I don't even have to put up bail.
Zero cash bail.
Wow.
It's a powder keg, man. It's just waiting for a disaster, you know? Like, if I'm a criminal, especially from another country where I don't even really respect the law like that, the rules or whatever, come here doing whatever I want, why would I care to stop doing it if I'm getting out of jail every time I do this? I mean, all right, it's like work.
Yeah.
Like, all right, I'm robbing somebody. I got myself. I did this. Whatever. I got caught today. I got to spend a night in jail. But I'll be out tomorrow, so I'll go back to work. You know, it's all right. You know, it's a revolving door.
And they're figuring that out. Well, they've already figured it out.
Yeah, they figured it out.
And that's why cops are quitting or retiring early at like a record clip.
Dude, what's the NYPD? How old is it? 150 years old, something like that, whatever. I think it was, you know, enacted maybe 1860s. Within the last 5 or 10 years, and don't quote me on this exactly, but within the last 5 or 10 years, has been the biggest exodus of cops from the New York City Police Department in its history since its origination. That's crazy. That's crazy. And the thing is, they're not refilling the ranks of all the guys that are retiring. So not only are you retiring, you're not getting an influx of new people coming in. And the influx that you might be getting is so bottom of the barrel.
Yeah, they're fat Jamaican ladies, as we said. They're TSA workers. And now they're carrying a badge and a gun.
It's the typical motor vehicle employee that all of a sudden has a gun and a shield now. You know what I mean? It's crazy. You know?
It's like,
they lowered the standards so much. So I was talking to a friend of mine, and this guy was a legend in the academy. You know, like he trained everybody. He was in the academy for 25, 30 years. People know who I'm talking about. And I sat on the desk with him one night and we were speaking about it. And he was just saying, these new recruits, I would never want to work with them. Never want to work with them. They can't even get over a wall. So I was like, so what do you do? Like, upper echelons, just tell them to walk around the wall. I'm like, so you passed them?
Yeah.
He's like, what is he going to do? He's being told to do something. We need boost the number.
We need
what is
bodies.
it that they can't do? Oh, they can do everything except get over the wall. Tell them to close the door and walk around it. It's like those kind of things. You know what I mean? So when you're changing the standards, we called it the JST. They made that super lax. You used to have to run 1.5 miles. I don't even think you have to run anymore. You know, like they took away all these things to kind of get a new influx of candidates, but you're not getting the best of the best. You know, which is really relevant till recent day. I don't know if you just saw, cop was placed on modified duty. Looked like it was in the Bronx. His partner, somebody's recording this on the street. His partner is in a brawl with the guy. They're going at it, whatever. They're fighting back and forth. He's literally so nonchalant, you wouldn't even thought he was a cop. He's on the radio just standing there, just literally looking around or whatever. Like he's lost in space, watching his partner go toe-to-toe with this guy. Wow. You imagine that?
That's
I'll tell you, if I was a cop with that guy and we got back to the precinct, I would throw hands with him.
Right.
I throw hands with straight up in the locker room. I would throw hands. We're gonna fight, me and you. 'Cause you're supposed to have my back, like I'm supposed to have yours. You just left me out there. You know, it would be a problem. I have a problem with that.
Did you have to get ones when you were a cop?
It was a little hazing involved in the beginning. It was 2 guys in a unit, and
no, I meant with like a perp.
Oh, me get on one-on-ones?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I thought you meant like get on one-on-one with another cop. Yeah, all the time. Yeah, all the
Knuckle
time.
up.
Knuckle up, straight up. Yeah. You'd have to fight. You had to throw hands. Like, hey, get up. Nah, I don't want to get up. Get up, bro. No, I don't want to get up. I'm going to ask you one more time to get up. I used to just do 3. I didn't really like to go. Because once you say it so many times, your words lose power.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So
you're telling the guy to get up because you're getting arrested.
Get up. Yeah, you're under arrest. Get up. You're under arrest. Get up. I'm going to ask you one more time. And then the hands come. So, you know, I got a background in martial arts when I was a kid and stuff like that. So I train. I'm confident in in my abilities to know how to handle myself. You know what I mean? So, you know, you start fighting. And when you go to grab the arm, the fist comes up right away. You know, you get punched. You know, I've been punched in the face. Yeah.
And do you sometimes did you kind of hope for that? Because you're like, I want to this dude up. I just touch me, bro. Touch me.
Oh, the touch me? Yeah. Not like in that situation when you're under arrest, but like when they egg you on.
That's
like
what I mean.
Like
if he gets in your, if somebody gets in your, did anybody do that? Get in your face, push you, and then you just take off on him?
Taunting gets to a point. So I'll tell you a story with one of my old partners. I love this guy to death. He's great. But he's very hands-on. He should have been a cop in the 80s.
Right.
He smashes people around, doesn't care. Like, bro, are you nuts? You're going to get like, it's all on camera. I don't give a whatever, you know? We're on one side of we're at 74th Street in Roosevelt. It's an interchange for many trains. So there's one side of the platform, another side of the platform. EF, 7, couple trains stop there. There's a kid on the other side of the platform going like this. He's giving him the finger or whatever, you know? And he's like, all right. And now he's getting a little more vulgar with it and he's shouting. So my partner can't take it. He should have been a cop in the 80s. I'm telling you, he's a trigger temper. He was a Marine. So, you know, he's tough. He comes down the stairs or whatever and starts this kid up. He's like, what'd you say? You said me? He's like, yeah, you. Punched him right in the mouth.
Wow.
Hit him right in the face. He's an old school cop. He got in trouble for it and everything. But
you know what?
You work with those kind of guys.
I like that.
And that's what you deal with, you know? So there was times, you know, I was always level-headed. I was cool, you know what I mean? But there was times where I got pushed like that. One time I was in Coney Island. And, you know, during the summer detail, they would send some people down there. So one of the sergeants I was working with at the time, whatever, you know, we would do plainclothes stuff and stuff like that. Sometimes just me and him. He was an FIO. So it was a field intelligence officer. So he had the ability to like cultivate informants and stuff like that. And he had a direct line to intel. You know what I mean? So anybody that's connected to intel, you're somebody of importance or you know someone important on the job. You know what I mean? So, you know, we went down to Coney Island once and we were just chilling, man. It was like a regular day and we were in uniform and this guy must have had too much to drink. He starts talking. We were by the boardwalk or whatever. And he goes, my partner, the sergeant goes to like arrest one of his friends. Right. And he's like, put this guy in cuffs. So when there's a lot of people like that, we got a van waiting because you can't like you just got to give him to the van, put him in the van and then they'll transport, especially when there's that large crowds or whatever. And this guy was pissed that we locked up his friend. He's like, oh, you know, the whole thing, whatever, whatever. I was begging for him to touch me or do something because the stuff that he was saying was like, we were ready. So we wound up dead arresting him because he put his hands on the sergeant.
Right.
He thought that he could get close enough with, you know, all the phone or whatever. And he like, tapped the sergeant like this, and that's all we needed.
Nice.
And then, you know, we tuned him up a little bit.
You tuned him up like...
We tuned him up a little bit.
Right. You get him on the ground.
I start right away with the cuffs. I'll put those cuffs. You want to fight with me? Yeah. I tell him right away, don't fight. Don't fight with me, you know? Or my famous thing was don't make me run. Because I put on some weight, so I wasn't really ready to run. So I was like, don't make me run. Don't make me run. You know, I would yell at them or whatever, and they would kind of like mess with their psyche. They wouldn't run.
What was the best fight you had? Meaning like, what was like the
street?
No. I'm talking about where, somebody knuckled up and they were kind of, it was like a fair fight. Like he was almost getting you.
We don't fight fair. I didn't fight fair.
What do you mean? So how,
describe it. If I know I'm going to have a problem with you.
Like I'm a big guy, somebody my size, 6'6", and I'm high out of my mind. I'm on PCP and I'm talking big and maybe I punch you, I push you. What do you do to me?
There's no knuckle back with you. I'm taking out my ass and I'm going straight for your shins. I'm gonna swipe your legs out of you. I'm gonna
right.
hit you
Right.
as hard as I can or whatever until you feel that pain that you know what I mean? That
Right.
stinging pain or whatever. Or, well, I mean, you asked me 2 questions here. So like, there's one that I could think of like a brawl that went crazy, but then like
Yeah.
a one-on-one, there wasn't any one-on-one. We don't fight fair.
Right.
Like if in the NYPD, we're taught not to fight fair.
Yeah.
If you're 1, we're 2. If you're 3, we're 4. If you're 5, we're 10. That's the way it goes. We don't lose. We don't lose. It's that simple. Biggest gang in New York City.
Right.
We don't lose. So, you know, that being said, there was, you know, some significant fights. But if it was a big guy like you, let's say, or somebody that I was like, damn, I'm going to have a problem with this guy or whatever, it was Mace, Asp, and sometimes the mace sucks because you don't want, if you mace a guy and you wrestling around with him, you get it in your
Yeah,
eyes, it's
yeah.
all over your clothes, and it makes it 10 times harder to fight.
What's the asp?
The Asp is the expendable baton.
Right.
Yeah, extendable baton.
So if you think there's a chance that you could lose in a stand-up fade,
weapon right
you're
away.
taking your baton out and taking their legs. Just
I would already have it in my hand sometimes if I knew I was going to fight. Because if you hold that,
Yeah.
and you hit somebody, if you punch with that, it's almost like brass knuckles or something. You know, you have like a roll of quarters in your hand. Boom. It does damage.
that thing hurts.
Yeah, it does damage.
Yeah.
I've hit people with that, man. I don't know.
Yeah.
I hit a guy once that was so high, bro. I don't know how he didn't get affected from it. He was off his mind. It was probably off of PCP.
Yeah.
Right? I tapped him. I tapped myself with that thing and I see stars. I tapped him just bunk, like one of those or whatever, and it didn't even get his attention. Okay. Now, you know, they teach you in the academy, like swing like this, like, swing like this. Whatever. I'm baseball batting this guy's shins, like, like Babe Ruth style. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Going
yeah.
hard. And that just basically maybe, you know, it was like somebody gnawing at your clothes like this, like that kind
Right,
of annoyance, you
right.
know, like that's how it affected him. That guy, you can't take him down. You got to call ESU. They can wrap him up in a burrito called the burrito.
Wow. What
Big
about your
neck.
taser though?
Wouldn't even I didn't have a taser at
Oh,
that
because
time.
if you're playing clothes.
We were allowed to carry them.
Yeah.
At that time, I think it was only sergeants that had them, but we were allowed to
Okay.
carry them in plain clothes.
Because I feel like that's an effective thing for like.
I've seen tasers not work on people.
Really?
I've seen a guy, the sergeant was chasing this guy one time, and I swear this, he dropped his radios. The only reason why I knew he was chasing him, I saw his radio on the floor. I lost sight of him. And I go down to get the radio, and the sergeant's running after this guy. He tased him. I saw the things go out. The guy ripped him out of his thing, kept running, ripped him right out of his side and kept running. Who knows what drugs he was on?
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean? So, but I have seen the taser work, which is kind of cool. Same thing, you know,
Yeah.
they lock up and they stop.
I mean, like, and I know there's accidental deaths, but like, we don't know what happened just before the cameras started rolling.
Right,
Dude,
right.
it's like, yeah, man, it's a tough job. It
It's a
really,
cra-
if you're doing it right. If you're actually like trying to help, it seems like a tough job. But if you're a fat Jamaican lady who seems like they're hiring, it's like they're going to look the other way while their partner's getting their ass beat by a dude that's been smoking angel dust, you know?
I think that's exactly what's going on. The cops are getting villainized, whether they do their job or they don't do the job.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, if I'm going to get paid either way, why am I even going to do anything? And that's shameful, you know, because you have to take some kind of police action. Like I said, was there times that I turned my head to certain things? Sure. But serious crimes, or like if there was ever somebody getting hurt, then I definitely wouldn't turn my head. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, you're there to help, you know? There was some scumbag bosses though that would, like, you know, like if you saw somebody like trying to wave you down, they'd be like, keep driving, you know? Yeah, there was a lot of that.
Yeah, I got to get to my kid's little league game. I got to get to the bar.
No, yeah, I want to go home. Whatever. I
Yeah.
got something to do. There was a lot of that, but you know, I guess with the cameras, you know, it kind of changed up a little bit. You know,
Okay,
it's
so when did body cams come into play?
I want to say the pilot program came in 15, 16, somewhere around there,
Okay.
but it wasn't completely rolled out to the department until I want to say maybe 18.
Okay.
You know?
But you're plain clothes
I'm playing
by
close.
this time.
We didn't have to have them. It wasn't necessary.
Because you're plain clothes.
Right.
So you obviously enjoyed that more because
1000%.
you're busting higher level crime. Did you ever feel, man, it seems pretty cool to be plain clothes. I don't know. I got to be honest with you. It seems like you get to be in your own like spy movie all the time.
1000%, man. It was,
Yeah.
you could do pretty much whatever you wanted throughout the day, you know,
Yeah.
with some leeway, you know what I mean? Especially when there was no cameras, no tracker.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun, but at the same time, you had responsibilities. You weren't just in the crime team for show. You know, they wanted they wanted numbers from you. They
Right.
expected numbers. There was guys that have been kicked off the crime team. A lot of guys that get kicked off the crime team. They think like, oh, it's cool now.
Yeah.
You know, when you hit that mark, you're kind of like separated from the regular, you know,
Yeah.
beat cops or the, you know, the patrol cops or whatever. It's
Yeah.
almost like a step up. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's a coveted position.
But you
In the
need-
beginning, I didn't even really look at that. I actually wanted to go field intelligence officer. I wanted to be the assistant to the field intelligence officer, cultivate some informants. I'm good with talking with people, you know what I mean? So it was like, I related to some of those guys from the street. I could talk with them. I could probably
Yeah.
maybe turn them, you know? There was a lot of guys that used to run in and I used to see them out in the bars. I didn't out them and let them know that they were informants and stuff, whatever, but these guys are actively talking to the cops while doing criminal shit in the Queens, Brooklyn, surrounding areas.
What kind of rat is committing subway crimes? What kind
A
of
guy-
CI is?
A guy who gets caught for something so stupid that he's actually going to do jail time for it because of his record
Yeah.
will spill the beans faster than anyone.
On
For a misdemeanor,
Yeah.
that might be like, yo, this is my 10th misdemeanor, or like, I got a felony case. They told me if I get locked up, I'm doing the full felony. Like, you don't know some of their cases. You know, they might
Yeah.
have attempted murder case and the conditions of their parole, they're not even allowed to be out of their house. So how are you going to explain to your parole officer or whoever, the judge, that you just got locked up for theft of service or smoking weed in public? Or you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, because a lot of times, like I said, back then, we used to be able to run names over the radio. So it was different. Now they got phones and
Right.
so if Central came back over the radio and you were waiting for a disposition, you didn't know the guy's record. You didn't know what he did. She just told you he's going or he's not. So if he's not going, you let him go. Now they pull up your name. These cops can see every single thing you did, and it's a different.
Right.
You know, you could just get arrested.
But then what information would they have that a subway cop would even want, I guess is.
Depends on where you're from.
That's
Depends
true.
on what neighborhood you're in. That's the
true.
thing. Everybody takes the subway. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, especially if you're from those neighborhoods where what's going on. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, for example, I brought an informant. I cultivated this informant. I told him, I was like, he was a dancer. Yeah, he was from the Bronx, young Puerto Rican kid from the Bronx.
Right.
Okay, he's probably still out there. Who knows? I introduced him to the FIO, and I was like, this kid's a dancer, but he wants to talk. They get paid for this. So it's kind of incentivized too
Right.
for them, you know what I mean? So it's like, you know, and he would give us like, yo, all right, this guy, this guy just dances. This guy robs people. This guy sells drugs. You were getting all the
I
information.
see.
You know
I
what I
see.
mean? So
Right.
it's like you let them live.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
But then you were getting it on the back end with
Wow.
all the information. So when I had cultivated him, I thought that was kind of cool. You know,
Right.
I was like,
Right.
wow, you know, he's giving us a lot of shit. And it was scumbag guys. Like you've seen their records, you know, they had like dirty crimes. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So it was like, I didn't mind. Like, yeah, put that in jail. You know, he deserves it.
Totally.
So it was
Totally.
like, you know, that was the cool part about it.
That's what I mean. And we were saying that off camera, like you're, and to the people in the neighborhood, the wise guys that you grew up with, they probably wouldn't have looked down on you for choosing to be a cop, especially a subway cop, because everybody, including high level criminals, want the streets to be clean. They want these like low level scumbags in jail. We all want that. I wanted that as a high level drug trafficker. I didn't want, I'd be like, yeah, good cops, take care of, let me live in peace.
Right.
You know?
I agree with you. I mean, and that was a sentiment with the guys I grew up with.
Yeah.
And a lot of those guys. For me, it was just a little different though, you know, because regardless, even though I was a solid dude, I always have been, and I never rattled, nobody ever got in trouble with the things that I did, you know, and I still would see these guys. It's just a bad look sometimes to say that you're wearing blue.
Right.
Because you just in the back of your head never know, is this guy going to choose me or is he going to choose the blue? You know what I mean? So people distance themselves from you. You know, it's just natural.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Did that hurt? Like, did that kind of, to have the old neighborhood sort of turn their back on you?
I wouldn't say they turned their back on me. It did bother me that some guys would be like, oh, don't say that. You know, he's a cop. He's a cop. Like that annoyed me. Because I'm like, I don't give a what you're doing right now. You can do whatever you want, whatever, you know what I mean? I'm a cop. That's my job. You know what I mean? I'm not a cop. I'm Tony. You know what I mean? That's my name. I do what I want to do. That's my thing. But, you know, I don't bleed blue and take it home with me. And that's my life. That wasn't me. I wasn't that guy.
Yeah.
So you could smoke weed and I wouldn't care. At the time, weed was illegal. You know, let's say things like that. You could have a dice game. What the would I care? You know what I mean? Maybe I would want to get in. I couldn't gamble illegally, but the things that I love to do as a kid are now very legal as long as you're doing with the government. You know what I mean? So that's what I meant when I said harmless vices and harmless crimes, like things like that. You know what I mean? So it wasn't like those guys, even though a lot of them, you know, they were sons of made men, or like the guy three houses down that grew up the guy that grew up 3 houses away from me is doing 30 years right now. You know what I mean? He's with the West Side. You know, so you know, he owned a local deli. There was things or whatever that, you know, I avoided just for my own well-being and their own well-being, because, you know, when you get on the NYPD, you're not allowed to associate with known criminals. Right. That's one of the rules. It's a very loose rule, though. Yeah. Very loose, you know, because you'll see, like I said before, with my time in the catering, you know, and one guy's an outlaw biker, the other guy's a lieutenant, you know. One guy's an FBI agent, the other's a mobster, and they're at the same party. So go figure. Right.
But, you know, working subway crimes, I imagine that part of the police force there's not that much opportunity for corruption when you're collaring, you know, fentanyl addicts and people swiping cell phones. So,
which is exactly, you're pretty quick, Johnny. That's exactly one of the reasons why I figured it would be one of the best places for me. Because I hung out in so many different neighborhoods. I can never put myself in a position to say like, damn, I'm going to be working in the 7-9 precinct or whatever. Like I know Tyrone smells weed out of that spot, or whatever, you know, or I can't work in the 104 in Middle Village because I know Vinny's got the cafe that I like to go in and they're running numbers. So it was like things like that.
So many conflicts of interest. And you were pulling up in a Mercedes to work. So imagine being from the 7-9.
Oh, they would have thought I was on a take.
Totally.
Yeah. I did well for myself before, you know, I was on the job. You know, I saved some money and I did all right. And, you know, my thing was cars. I like cars or whatever. So I had a nice Mercedes. I had a Lexus, a nice Mercedes, you know. But cops are haters, man. They're the biggest haters. You'll notice, like, the number one cops that call, I have a friend that works in IAB. The number one people that call on cops are other cops.
Snitching on them.
That's the way it is. He said the public rarely even calls. It's one cop usually calling about another.
Wow.
Yeah. And he's a supervisor, so all that passes by his desk.
It seems like the gossip in the police force is like what makes the job bearable. It's
high
like how you
with
pass,
guns, man.
For sure.
That's what we call it, high school with guns.
Who's having an affair with this other cop? They're all each other. It's you know, this guy is dating this politician's, you know, ex or whatever.
That's his cousin's, his wife's a chief, or this one, or his father's so and so. It's all the same.
Yeah. So the years are moving by. Did you see the encroachment of fentanyl moving up to the pandemic, working plain clothes? Was that a big thing out there?
So the concentrated areas for the drugs, okay, and you would see a lot of drug addicts in the system. And these are not the people you're stopping. You jump that turnstile, you walk to that gate, you be my guest. I'm not stopping you. You know what I mean?
Because you just don't even want to touch them.
Don't even want to get close. Like I seen one guy picking bugs off himself, literally like going in his pants and flinging off bugs. Like, you know,
every New Yorker's biggest fear, bed bugs. This guy's walking around.
Forget it. And he's got them all on his crotch and everything. You want to touch that and bring that home? You know how many times it was bed bugs outbreaks in the precinct? You would get chastised or whatever if you brought back somebody that looked like that. They didn't like it. You got punished if you walked in the door with that. Somebody knew that they assigned you that collar because maybe you didn't have one for the month, or you pissed somebody off and they called it a bag. It's like, who brought in this bag? Wow. It was like, like you stink up the whole cells and it's just terrible.
Okay, so for the junkies that are just running around the subway system, you do nothing about them.
Pretty much now. They got carte blanche. And most cops will tell you this, unless there is a homeless initiative, we'll call homeless outreach and they'll come and get them and stuff like that. But there's really nothing besides loitering that's illegal about walking around the subway station. You know what I mean? Or hopping on one cart and then going to the other one, doing it all night. So when fentanyl came around, what you saw was a change in that to an extent. It was more like The Walking Dead, you know, like zombie land. You saw the dope fiend lean, you know, like you saw that on 125th and Lex, like I said, that's methadone.
Classic heroin, New
symptoms,
York
behavior.
culture,
Right. Guy touches his head down to his ankles, comes back up or whatever. He looks like a gymnast. That's the dope fiend lean. You know what I mean? So
Pilates.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, you still saw that. That was there. But those are those old addicts that been been shooting this stuff since the 80s.
Yeah.
They don't die. They're going to be there. They're still there. The new group, the younger group, was when you saw the fentanyl. And that's where you saw like ravage behavior. And I mean, the hot spot for it in the city, in my opinion, was 125th and Lex.
Okay,
It
so
used to be
Harlem.
the old Harlem. Yeah. You know, it was a run on the 6th line. Once you walked upstairs, and we used to get detailed there all the time. If you worked in Manhattan, if you worked an event, you knew that you maybe had to be there, and it sucked because it was such a corner, but there was always a detail there as far as transit. Yeah.
So are you, and these are like young people? Younger
Well, what's
people?
younger than like your average, maybe 50, 60-year-old heroin addict that's been around the street? You know, he's got like maybe 20 years on the street. We're talking like the newer generation, maybe like 5, 10, maybe tops years on the street, a couple years on the street, running and hustling or whatever. You saw them and the deterioration of them, you know, and you'd ask him what they do, you know. Remember, it was like bath salts they were doing that one time. Guy was eating somebody's face, something like that. That's the level of behavior.
Wow.
Excuse me. That's the level of behavior that you saw in those areas.
Wow.
From
fentanyl.
From fentanyl, yeah.
And did you witness some of that? Did you call her anything that was super like fentanyl driven?
No, thank God, I never had to deal with it.
Did you ever take drugs off people?
Yes. I had a lot of drug arrests.
What did you see?
Heroin, crack mostly.
Okay, so this
heroin,
crack still
crack was around.
I wonder if that's still around.
It is still around. But nowadays, I don't know how much, but I know it's still around. Right. It was around back
Times
then.
Square.
Things change now so much that people don't even do coke anymore.
No.
You know, it's Tusi. Everybody's talking about Tusi.
You know where that comes from? That's the Colombians.
Colombia.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Wow. So a junkie gets arrested with possession. He's going in?
So it depends, okay? Remember what I told you before? COs complaining, news, this and that. They know what goes on in their precincts, this CO. If they want to get, it's political at that point. If they want to get promoted or they want to show that they're doing their job and making a difference in the community, they'll do an initiative. That initiative might be, we're going to put a big spotlight on this corner because it's a shooting post and we have to have cops there. So for that instance, when there's a heavy intake of drugs and drug addicts and those zombies walking there, they're going more community-based. You know what I mean? They're getting the outreach groups and stuff like that. So they're not really policing drug possession per se. You know what I'm trying to say?
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's moved more towards the softer hand of the law.
Right, because if it's not, if you could beat somebody up and you're getting R&R'd, if you got a shot of heroin, I imagine you're also going to get out without bail. Yeah. You're not going to need a bail, you know?
For what? Like I said, it's all the way up to attempted murder. So you could rob somebody's phone, have a bag of heroin in your pocket, and be totally disorderly and probably get charged with those 3 and be right out.
Wow. Yeah. So what do you recommend for like a tourist or somebody that lives in New York, a civilian, you know, somebody that lives in Manhattan and they just ride the subway because they're just one of the damned that got to do that? What do you recommend? Because you can't have a gun in New York. There's no concealed carry laws. Right. What can they do to prevent being assaulted, pickpocketed? But assaulted definitely, because that's the most serious of usually what's happening to people, or slashed. Right. You know?
Yeah, recently, as you see, a lot of people getting punched in the face, and that started a long time ago. I don't know if you remember, Mike Tyson talks about it. They used to play a knockout game or whatever.
Of course.
Just knock people out. Yeah. You heard about that happening, you know? Or when I was growing up, it was famous for the Bloods to be like, who that? And then you turn around and they slice your face. That was the thing growing up, you know? So I think now with them actually attacking civilians and knocking them out, you know, it's led to, you have to be more aware of your surroundings. Situational awareness is paramount in New York. You know what I mean? So, you know, when you're in the subways, definitely don't stand too close to the platform, stuff like that. You know, watch your back. Don't have your head buried in your phone. You know, just the typical things that you might recommend to, you know, anyone that's coming into New York City or any other big city, you know. Make sure your wallets are in your front pockets and stuff like that, because pickpocketing, assaults, and robberies, they happen. You know,
don't fall asleep on the train.
Definitely don't fall asleep. I would avoid the subway at night all the way.
Okay.
All the way.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm talking about daytime here. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm talking about just a regular day. Because like
Right.
I said, things are happening in the day. Officers getting shot. The girl I told you, that happened in broad
Right.
daylight, 14th Street.
Right.
You know what I mean?
So, after 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, don't ride the subway if you can.
yeah, I
avoid
would
it.
say, the old saying, it's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your children are? Like, it's after 10 o'clock, nothing really, happens that's particularly safe, especially in the subway system. So if you're a tourist, I would, or somebody just visiting the city, I would try to avoid it as much as
Right.
you
But
can.
like, what can they carry? What's a white girl that lives in Bed-Stuy?
Mace. Mace
Mace?
is the safest thing. Yeah, cops, you can buy it pretty much at every store.
Right.
Cops won't really judge you for having mace. I used to do bag checks a lot in the subway. Where you look in people's bag, the random bag search or whatever.
Right.
You know what I mean? So you find some real comical stuff in there. you know?
Really?
Never came across a weapon per se, like a gun, even though some cops have arrested people for finding guns in their bags. It's weird that you would actually go to the booth and open up your bag at the little table and when you know you have a gun in there.
I
But
didn't
it
even
would
know
happen.
about this random bag check thing.
So the New York City implemented this years ago. It's supposed to be random, and I believe it was enacted after 9/11
Right.
to check, for bombs and explosives
Yeah.
and something like that. They enacted a set of rules that dictates rules and regulations to the riders and how you're supposed to behave with the New York City subway system.
Right.
And one of those rules is that you're allowed to be searched at random on entry into any entry of the New York City subway system, any stop, anywhere in the whole city.
Right.
So they would be random. A lot of the times we'd have them at sensitive locations, but it might just be Woodhaven Boulevard on the J line.
Right.
You know what I mean? And you might get a guy that had no idea that you were gonna be there
Yeah.
and just kind of gets caught or freezes or whatever.
Yeah.
Or sometimes they would run. They would see you and be like, oh, this. We were like, hey, can I check your bag? And they'd be like, no. Like, you really can't say anything. You just can't let them into the subway.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I see. Interesting. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like the airport.
Kind of.
Like you're subject to random search.
Right.
Now, about that, because we see every generation or so, we see a bomb go off in like a subway station in Russia and the subway station in Spain.
Right.
Like, are New York's best and brightest? That these fat Jamaican ladies, are they the ones? Are they our first line of defense against terrorism in the New York City subways, or what is are there federal agents that are working amongst you guys that you don't even know about?
Right. So regardless of what you see on the front lines, there's always somebody behind the screens,
Right.
kind of controlling things. So I think that, I don't want to completely shit on the NYPD here or whatever. I think they're a respected organization. They've been around for a long time. I just think that they're going through some growing pains right now,
Sure.
with
Whole city is.
the whole political
Yeah.
climate and the crime and everything else. But at the same time, there's a lot of qualified gentlemen behind the scenes that when it's the fan, I believe you'll call and they'll take care of it kind of thing, and those being those units that you said, more specialized behind the scenes.
Right.
So, are they jointly working with the FBI? 1,000%. The NYPD has the exact same technology that the FBI uses.
Right.
So they work tandem, hand in hand with each other. You have joint federal task forces in regards to terrorism, in regards to drugs. They call it HIDTA, so.
But I don't know. I mean, the fact that there's not even cameras in the subway cars to me is like so 20th century. I'm shocked. I'm about to go get in a fight, bro. I'm about to go beat somebody up in the subway, bro. It's going to happen. So how did this whole career end? You weren't a cop for very long,
Nah, I did just under 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, just under 10 years. So I was supposed to get sworn on in 12 with the whole undercover thing. And it's funny though, because going from like plain clothes, like being in there, I attracted the attention of even more people that wanted to recruit me to go undercover. So I was at it was at a dinner. It was an Italian Charities dinner. And same thing, I had met an individual who was like, yo, I used to do undercover work. He was older and stuff like that. Same connection I had in the chief of department's office, introduced us and stuff like that. Got me a meeting with Bill Bratton, police commissioner at the time. You know what I mean?
Right.
William J. Bratton. Second round, because he was a commissioner before. Then I think he went out to LA, came here to LA and like cleaned up the city and did all that stuff. And I had a one-on-one with Bratton. We sat down or whatever and we talked and, he heard about me. He said I was doing good things in the transit system, why I don't want to go to do undercover and all this kind of stuff. And I politely turned it down, And then it was 3 times. That was the first, that was the second, and the third time, I was with the crime team, actually, right? We went to this spot in Queens. Again, what did I say before? Cops and mobsters rub together. It's a
Yeah.
spot on Queens Boulevard. We go to the Italian Association. Okay, so the NYPD has all these clubs and associations,
Right.
and you kind of just intermingling with the community, kind of. So we go to the Italian Association, and there was an inspector that I knew. Tony, I know for years. I worked his daughter's Sweet 16 when I was in the catering business. This is how long ago this was. Get over here. What are you doing? He used to be doing narcotics. He did narcotics in Bed-Stuy and arrested Jay-Z back in the day. He told me in Marcy Pride. Yeah, so this guy, and now he's a DI. Yeah,
DI's what?
a deputy inspector.
Okay.
He was maybe a full bird at the time, but he was somewhere up there, one of the other. But
Wow.
yeah, so he was like, why don't you want to do narcotics? Come into narcotics. You got to come in. You
Right.
don't have to do undercover. Don't worry. I know we got you. Like, just come in. Come over to narcotics.
Yeah.
You'll be good. You know, we'll have you as an investigator.
Does your pay go up?
Yeah, because then you get on your track. You know what I
Right.
mean? To get your detective
Right.
shield. So there was a couple times where, you know, that was why they wanted me really, they were like, they were floating that. You go
Yeah.
undercover, year and a half, you get your detective
Right.
shield, blah, blah, blah. It's like a dream that they sell you.
Yeah.
Right.
You were a good cop.
I was good. I was active.
Yeah.
I took my time and turned
Yeah.
my head when I needed to, but when I was the guy you wanted there when went
Right.
down because I wasn't scared and I was used to the, you know, I grew up around that. So it was nothing for me to walk into the project.
Right.
Some of these kids at work was the first time they ever stepped in a project building.
Right.
It's a whole different animal. And they hear the stories, they get scared. I wasn't like that. You know what I mean? Not saying I didn't have fear. Of course I had fear. Fear of the unknown. You can get shot anytime, whatever. But it was more along the lines is, I'm not out of my element here. I'm good. You know what I mean? Unbeknownst to that inspector at that time, one of the guys in the unit was dying to get onto the narcotics team. He went on like 3 different interviews trying to get on his team, and he's next to me. So that was when it kind of like got out a little bit more like, yo, this kid's like hooked up. You know, he's got like connections all over the place, you know?
So you just ended it. You said, I'm going to retire and move to Vegas.
Yeah, pretty much. You know, I had enough of it. I had the opportunity to go back. So I wound up getting hurt, and then after I got hurt, you know, I wound up in the medical division. Okay, this is now when the medical division is rocking and rolling. I mean, pandemic is crazy. The riots are all over the place. The radio's going nuts. Cops getting hurt. You know, they needed someone to do the paperwork, all that kind of stuff or whatever. It really wasn't a fun time. Not for cops on the street, and definitely not for cops that were stuck inside or whatever else. You know, it was just a show all the way around.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Well, what are you doing now? Tell us where that we can find you.
So I retired in 22. Didn't really want to know what I wanted to do with my life, but I started a podcast, like a little inspiration from you, I think, John.
right,
You know, I
cool.
see your success, man. You know, I'm trying to follow in your footsteps. It's called Corruption Connection. It's on YouTube. It's more of a crime noir kind of thing, you know, like the old gumshoe detectives talking about the crime stories. I talk about a lot of unheard mafia stories, some things that, you know, people are interested in nowadays. Mob genre is huge. And, you know, things like that. My life and time in the NYPD, growing up in New York City, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah, cool. Corruption Connection on YouTube.
On YouTube, yeah.
Plug Instagram.
Yep, I'm on Instagram as
Corruption
well. TikTok,
Connection.
yeah, the whole thing. Man.
Okay,
Yeah, for
great.
sure.
So we're gonna switch over to the Patreon and let's talk about some of that mob. But man, what a fascinating job. It's like to the layperson. I know it's normal for you, but yeah, that's pretty crazy, man. What was your favorite thing about the job and least favorite thing before we get out of here?
The favorite thing I'd have to say was the freedom when I was in plainclothes. I mean, we did pretty much whatever we wanted within reason.
Right.
We had carte blanche of the whole city. We had a van because we would roll around with a sergeant. So it was unmarked. Nobody knew we were cops. So you could just imagine some of the trouble we would get into. You know?
Man,
And there's
power.
No cameras.
You feel like that was.
I
did you
don't
like
know
the
if
power?
it was power, but it was definitely the connections. You know what I mean? It was like, hey, what do you do? Oh, he's under the NYPD banner. You know what I mean? So they didn't know who you were, but they knew that you were somehow affiliated with that, and nobody, you know.
But I meant the power to arrest somebody that's being a. And you can just bam, hit him in the face, cuff him, and throw him into the van. Like that's got to feel good. This guy's a scumbag.
It's fun getting your frustrations out on the people that deserve it. I'll tell you that much.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I said, that guy mouthing off to me in Coney Island or whatever, it was a pleasure to put those cuffs as tight as I could and throw around with him a little. You know? Or even the guy, like I said, that I throw hands with or whatever. You know, I don't fight fair, but you'll respect the guy that wants to actually throw hands with you. You know, and when my thing was, when the cuffs were on, it was over.
Right.
That was it. You know,
Right.
I wasn't a scumbag to like, you know, like you're a cuff, then I'm going to kick you down the stairs. Nah, I didn't do that kind of stuff. You know, but, you know, I would go, you know.
What was your least favorite part about the job?
The bureaucratic, bro. bro. Everything is red tape. You can't get things done. Like I said, with the arrests, how am I making these quality arrests and the DA's refusing to prosecute? Or the sergeant's telling me, don't go out and make an arrest today. We want physical presence, stuff like that. It was just a lot of red tape and a lot of roads that led back to nowhere. Meaning this guy's following this guy's order, was following this guy's order, and this guy at the top don't even know what the he's talking about. So the order is kind of like a game of telephone that just gets so wired down that the things that we did as cops sometimes just didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
You know, poorly run.
Every cop says that about the higher ups. What do you think, Eric Adams?
They're out of touch with the street. That's what it is.
Do you think Eric Adams is bad for the city as a whole? Is a bad mayor?
I think so. He's making a lot of bad moves right now. You know what I mean? Being seen out in public. He calls himself the swagger mayor. Some of the things that he said is crazy, you know? I'm not an Eric Adams fan or a hater or whatever, but I think that we could find somebody a little more qualified.
Right.
We're New York City. We're the best. You can't find somebody a little more qualified, you know?
I mean,
makes me think or whatever that maybe there's a little something deeper behind it. You know what I mean? Maybe they want somebody like that who's easily controllable or, you know, doing that kind of thing because his priority is not the city. You could see that.
Right.
You know, he's in Miami or whatever every couple of weeks, you know?
Exactly.
How you running the city from South Beach.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. Well, I hope it turns for the best. I mean, everything swings back. I just don't know how long it's going to be in this rut, you know, because it's my favorite city on earth. You
Mine
know
too.
what I mean?
I miss the food, man. That's
of
for sure.
course,
Yeah,
of
moving
course.
out west, you guys got food out here.
Yeah.
You think you know
Well,
what pizza is, but you don't.
That's a fact. I totally agree with you. Tony, Corruption Connection, thanks so much for coming by, brother. That was great.
Appreciate you having me, man.
Yeah,
It's been
hell
a
yeah.
pleasure, man. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys. We'll see you on Patreon. Peace.